Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we continue with the compilation videos which are aimed at people who are working or people who are driving or people who just have a heck of a lot of time and want something on in the background. Alright, our first story today comes to us from egrant03. Can't remove the charge? Well, I'll just use it then. Let's jump right in. In the early 2000s, when I first moved out on my own, I rented from a complex that charged you for assigned parking. It was an upcharge of $25 a month. If you didn't get assigned parking, you would have to fight for a space on the street. My apartment was in the back of the complex, and I was getting over a recent knee and ankle injury, so I opted for paid parking that was relatively close to my front door. My car was a junker, 3 years older than I am, but it ran semi-okay and the heater worked. As a newly minted adult, I was happy to have it. About 3 months into my lease, my car went to the great scrap heap in the sky. I had gotten used to the local transit system and discovered a nearby store would drop off groceries for me. This was long before Walmart and other stores started doing it, so it was cheaper than figuring a month's supplies on the bus. So I opted not to replace the car and utilize the bus pass my work reimbursed me for. I went to my leasing office and told them I no longer needed the space, and would you please remove the extra charge from my bill? The manager at the desk was new and had never been asked that before. She promised to look into it and let me know. I was naive and figured it would be gone come next month. Nope, it was still there. I paid all but the parking space and called up the complex. Same girl. She said she was awaiting word from higher-ups and offered me a credit for the charge as a one-time courtesy. I reminded her that I no longer owned a car. I hadn't just changed my mind. I told her that the space had been empty for close to a month now and that I won't be utilizing it. She said she understood loud and clear and would get it sorted by next month. 3 days before rent was due, she finally got back to me. Apparently, it was in my lease and couldn't be removed without breaking the lease and signing a new one. Even if I didn't move out, the lease breaking and initiation fees would be charged to me, and my rent would go up to the new current market value. This would be over $1,000, so not an option for someone freshly on their own. I kept the parking space on the lease. 3 weeks later, I was reviewing my lease to get the phone number for maintenance and noticed the clause for the parking space. Essentially, I could park a motorcycle, scooter such as a Vespa, a car, a truck, an SUV, or a trailer in the space. Gears were turning. For me to be in compliance, I had to have wheels on anything parked in my space. So I went to my local version of Craigslist and found a wheeled container similar to a shipping container. It wasn't cheap, but it was worth every cent. The complex offered storage sheds at an upcharge too. Being fresh out of high school, I didn't have much to store. My neighbor, though, did. I threw a lock on the unit and offered it to my neighbor for half the cost of a shed, $35 a month. He was able to move his stuff out of his storage unit where he was paying over $100 a month, and the container was available 24/7, 365. He was happy for the arrangement and paid several months in advance. The complex put several tow stickers for out of compliance on the trailer, but I called the tow company and faxed them a copy of the lease where it says trailers are allowed. The container was registered with the county as a utility trailer, so there's nothing they could do. They tried to fine me for improper parking, but again, I had proof I was within my rights. They even offered to remove the charge for parking on my lease if I would relocate the container. With what my neighbor was paying, I could cover my water bill every month, so I declined. I stayed 18 months and sold the trailer to my neighbor when I moved out. He had to rent a car to relocate it to his assigned space, but he said it was worth the couple hundred he paid. He ended up saving over $1,000 a year renting from me. Other neighbors even started bringing in their own containers too, even if it meant getting a second space. Sheds were being vacated at such a large volume, the complex tried to give them away at 6 months free. Few took them up on it. The complex amended the new leases to exclude trailers, but could do nothing about those that already had them in the spot. Instead of moving out and giving notice, renters would reassign their lease to new people so they could be grandfathered into the trailer clause. I drove by the facility 2 years or so after I moved out, going to a friend's for Thanksgiving. The complex had been sold to a new owner and changed their name. But wouldn't you know, there were still about a dozen wheeled shipping containers parked in the lot. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Aviitis. It says, "That, my friend, is a job well done. Not only have you given them the triple middle finger, you've also helped out a ton of people over several rental generations. You may and should be happy for the way you dealt with this and for all the people that have benefited rightly from your actions." One really fun thing to think about with this one is that if the complex had had it towed, they would have been completely on the hook for the tow, the storage fees, and getting it back to you, all because it was in the lease. I absolutely love that when they figured out what you were doing, they'd said that they could finally remove that charge from your lease. Like they couldn't do it in the first place, but now that you're inconveniencing them, they can? How does that work? Our next story today comes to us from Toffee Caked. Tell the driver he's terrible? Yes, of course. Let's jump right in. Reminded of this by another post here of family members working at the same place. Many years ago, other half and I worked at the same company, but in completely different departments. Other half worked in sales as a salesman and driver, taking out products on his own local route. There was 13 other local routes in that department, fresh product delivered daily. The customer base on my other half's department is small businesses, corner shops, sandwich shops, takeouts, eateries, that kind of thing. These small customers would have orders ranging from $10 to $50 at a time. I worked in the offices, predominantly working with the distant national and international customers, very large businesses in the food industry that most people have certainly heard of for frozen product delivery. Their orders were in the range of $80,000 to $100,000 per month, ordering pallets over pallets of product. I managed their orders and the accounts, doing the aged debt collecting on those. One thing I learned at this place that has stayed true at every other job I've had, the small fry customers are the ones that complain the most and the loudest. Due to the nature of the job, I had to take phone calls, a mixture of the large customers haggling to pay their debts later, sprinkled with the local corner shops calling to complain. Took a call one morning from Karen, of course, complaining that her delivery was short, the driver is horrible, and a piece of work and should be fired. She's always having the same problem with this driver. He's never on time, he's surly, he's rude, and that I should tell the driver to buck his ideas up or they are never ordering product from us again. She made some choice words about the driver, screaming, swearing, the whole 9 yards. I asked the business name and the business location. The location by the area tells me which route they are on before I even look up their account. Once I have the business name, I already recognize them as a problem customer. They have actually been moved from one neighboring route to another due to issues. Read, many sales drivers refusing to have anything more to do with them. Karen continues to rant while I do due diligence to look up their account. So what are you going to do about it? I want the driver reprimanded immediately. My order was short of this product and that product. He was late. He wouldn't comp or refund the missing products. He's a C and an F, blah, 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 blah. Well, I'm super sorry about that. Let me fix this for you. I see your order on my screen here, and I also see your handwritten faxed order that was scanned in. Those products aren't on your order, I'm afraid. The driver can't credit items that were not ordered. Yes, I did. I want compensation and the driver fired. I see. Let me dig into this a little further. Right, I see there has been a lot of credits in your account already. Also, lining up your orders that didn't include those credited products in the past? That's rather odd. Important to note, it was normal for the local drivers to sometimes put in credits to keep the smaller customers quiet and on board. Sometimes production issues happen, ordered products are short or not available that day. The business had a whole philosophy that the customer was always right, and to keep them happy. I was in the business for debt collecting, completely opposite to that, and had the power to place customers on hold. They got nothing until they paid up. I noticed that this customer hasn't paid their bill for over 6 weeks. They now fall under my remit. Your driver's lying. I know what I've ordered. Your drivers are always doing this and he was a rude F. I want the driver reprimanded and fired or I'm never ordering again. Given that they had been a problem account for quite some time, I decide to comply. You know, I'll follow this up for you. I can't speak to the driver right now as they're out delivering, but I will reprimand the driver tonight over dinner at home. Karen was silent at first. Wait, what? My other half is 6'2", built like a brick house. He isn't a doormat, but he's also the most chill and least rude person I have ever known. We take this very seriously and don't wish to lose your business. We're very sorry to hear you're unsatisfied, and I do see you've had similar problems in the past. Unfortunately, I don't have the authority to fire my other half, but here's what I can do. As your account is now in aged debt, I will place your deliveries on hold, and I promise you won't see that driver until the account is fully audited and paid in full. He's your husband? I don't think we need to go that far. He is, but that isn't relevant. I insist we look into your complaint and take it seriously. I'll order a personal audit of your account, as all these credits for product not included in your past orders is concerning. I'll get this all straightened out for you. If you decide to take your business elsewhere after the audit is complete and the account settled, we'll be sorry to see you go, but completely understand your stance if we can't find a resolution. Karen splutters, mumbles that it's all okay, she was having a bad day and it's not all that bad. I know, don't worry, let me audit this and get you a final correct total, and the driver won't bother you again until the account is square and you're happy with the service. Aftermath. Customer's aged bill came in at $150 more for items that were credited to keep them happy and quiet. When she insisted to complain that they were not getting product they did not order in the first place, and tried to make out my other half was terrible at his job. They didn't get any orders till the account was paid in full, and customer never made a peep again. Husband continued to deliver to them after the audit and settling the bill, and always walked in there with a big smile. Moral of the story, be careful who you lie and complain to, because that's going to bite you in the butt one day. Jumping down to the comment section in this one, there's one from a user called Quahog News. It says, I can't remember who said it, but I love the quote, "The squeaky wheel doesn't always get the grease. Sometimes it gets replaced." I think it applies here pretty well, laugh out loud. This has to be every delivery driver's dream come true. I do hope the story spread company-wide and became a legend. OP responded to this one and said, those drivers in that department that had dealt with the customer previously took great pleasure in the fact I handed the customer's butt to them. Husband and I remember this moment fondly when we reminisce about the time we worked at the same place. And husband does get a proud crap-eating grin that wifey stuck up for him. You know, at the end of this story I kinda got disappointed because, well, they're still delivering to this customer in the end. I felt like they should have been cut off. But I want to know, was that just me? Should the customer have been cut off altogether in this case? Because they were obviously trying to fraud the company? Or should they just be given another chance like OP said and continue deliveries in the future? Comment what you think down below. Our next story today comes to us from Particular Tax 3579. Corporate said so. Let's jump right in. Someone posted a pizza story and it's sending me back, so here's a good one from me to you. I used to sling pizza, and I had this one couple who would regularly come in and order a specialty pizza, think meat lovers, but with 3 times the amount of toppings, like extra everything. Plus, they would add extra of other toppings that weren't originally on that pizza, like olives and onions. So of course, this meant it never cooked thoroughly, even after sending it through the oven twice. Every single time they would complain about the pizza being too burnt on the edges and not cooked enough, and it took too long, and they also wanted more of the toppings. I tried repeatedly to explain to them that every extra topping you add makes the portion size of all the toppings go down. I don't even understand why we were allowed to add so many toppings on at the register. Anyways, about the 5th or 6th time I replaced the pizza for them because they kept complaining to corporate and received credit, the man came in again and said they spoke to corporate and corporate wants me to make the pizza the way they want it. I knew that wasn't true. There really wasn't a corporate customers could call, just a call center, and those people did not care. But I decided I'd do exactly what they asked, but made sure to explain to them that if I made it their way and it didn't turn out well, they wouldn't be getting any more remakes. I took the order and made it as they were expecting, kind of. I put full portions of each topping on that monster. To say that pizza was an effing mountain is an understatement. It didn't even fit in the oven. I had to take toppings off. I did feel a little bad at this point, knowing full well they paid, with the store credit, over $40 for this one pizza. and there was no way it would ever properly cook. So I did give it 2 runs through the oven, but that still didn't help. It was pan-to-pan toppings, so getting out of the pan sucked, and I just put and cut it right in the box so the toppings wouldn't fall everywhere. After I cut it, the slices disappeared under the toppings, and you couldn't even see crust, so it just looked like a giant pile of trash toppings dumped in a box. I couldn't even close it. I brought it to the customer, and he started to lose it on me, saying it took too long, and it looked like a mess, and he wanted another credit. I pulled out his receipt and asked which part wasn't up to par. He said it didn't look cooked, and I reminded him how I warned him of that with this amount of toppings, and I would have cooked it longer if he hadn't been complaining about time. I also showed him the at-home cooking time and temps on the box. I showed him the crust underneath and went through all the toppings and extras. Everything was accounted for as he asked for it, so I told him I'd let management and corporate know that it was made to his liking. Never saw them again. Down in the comment section for this one, there's one from a user called Bratling. It says, "Dude, don't feel bad. These people were exploiting the system to get free pizzas from your store 5 times. That's not just being slow to learn. They kept at it until you called their bluff. And then they went to screw with other stores instead of yours. Great story." I'm glad this turned out okay for OP and that the customer never come back, but I think another way they could have dealt with this would have been to refuse to put that one together altogether and say, "I'm sorry. I've told you how that's going to turn out. I probably can't even safely get that into a box without getting it all over the place, and it's just not going to be fully cooked. We can't do that. What else can I get for you?" Unfortunately, with this type of person, I think that probably would have just escalated the situation even further, so I guess OP did the right thing anyway. Our next story today comes to us from FuelOil7196. Don't want to total my late model car? Okay, I warned you. Let's jump right in. 2 years ago, I hit a warthog-sized raccoon on my way home from work. I was driving an '09 Suzuki SX4 hatchback. The raccoon did a good bit of body damage to the front bumper and wheel well. The estimate to repair it was $2,200. I giggled at the adjuster when he said the insurance company was approving the repair instead of totaling the car. He insisted it was worth just under $5,000, so it should be fixed. I told him that having owned the car for a decade, it's a pain in the butt to get some parts since Suzuki closed their US business. He insisted. Insurance provided a rental. It ran $800 a week. So 4 weeks go by, the car isn't repaired. The shop can't find a wheel well to finish the job. Adjuster calls, a bit mad at me that I wasn't pressuring the body shop. I reminded him that I have insurance to make me whole and that's not my job. The repairs were a bit more expensive than anticipated. $2,500 repair plus COVID cleaning fee $200 equals $2,700 plus $3,200 for the rental. They had now spent more than the alleged value of the car. So no, the adjuster insists the car is drivable without the wheel well while he finds the part. I offered that was a stupid idea, and it's there to protect the engine compartment. He insists, okay. I drive it. My work is 30 miles away. I drove it through a snowstorm. With no wheel well, the snow was thrown into the engine compartment. Immediately in front of the affected wheel is the battery, fuses, and computer. They were all absolutely caked in snow, salt, and ice. Now all the dash lights are going off randomly and the car is shutting itself off. I called the adjuster and told him that driving without the wheel well has likely ruined the computer, fuse box, and battery. I asked which shop has a contract with them to fix these issues. Big sigh on the other end, pregnant pause. Well, I think we spent enough on this car. We'll just total you out. It's probably only worth $2,000, so that's what we'll pay you. No, you said just under $5,000. That's what I want. They wrote me a check for $4,700. All in, I figured they spent about $10,000 on a vehicle worth, at best, $5,000. I would have accepted $3,000 or less if they offered it originally. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Lord Adamosk. It says, I'm an insurance adjuster for a major company. What sort of rinky-dink operation was your company running that they tried to strong-arm you into driving an unfinished car? I'm extremely aware of the supply chain issues, getting parts, even for new vehicles, but still. I think the part of this that gets me the most is that the insurance company was trying to get OP to keep on top of the repair shop. Like, isn't that exactly your job, insurance company? What are you doing over there anyway? And then, in the end, they tried to offer you a lot less than they originally said the vehicle was worth? OP, that company sounds like a gigantic scam. I think it's time to go with somebody else. Our next story today comes to us from Daft Boy Dim. Company saves cost by taking away company cars. Let's jump right in. About 6 years ago, I worked for a power supply company in the UK. I worked in a small project team that coordinated all the company's major infrastructure projects, and the role required travel to meetings all over the country. We'd average around 800 miles a week in company miles over the year, depending on the time of year and location of projects, etc. Someone in the finance department had reviewed our expense claims and calculated that over 1/4 we'd not covered the required number of company miles to meet the company's policy on company cars. For that 1/4 without looking at any other data. We lost our company car entitlement, and the company told us we had to return them to the fleet company at the end of their leases. Malicious compliance activated. As we were project engineers, we had a very particular set of skills for knowing how to follow rules to the letter, and how to do so in a manner that benefited the company or project or individuals. Usually, if it benefited the company, it benefited all involved. This was not one of those occasions. We pay benefit tax on our company cars in the UK. The rules around this change as and when the government feels like it. My team had all carefully chosen our cars to be zero cost to ourselves by choosing cars that were below the allowance of £300 a month, so the remaining allowance covered the tax obligation. We'd all be screwed by the benefit in kind tax changes that year, and we're now paying tax. So for starters, we reviewed the company car policy and found the company had no way of stopping us handing our cars back with immediate effect, whilst the company was still responsible for the leases. So we all made arrangements for personal cars and handed our keys over at the next team meeting. We'd also reviewed the company travel policy. We started using hire cars and trains for traveling. Trains and hire cars in the UK are not cheap, as none of us were willing to use our personal cars and claim the 50 pence per mile. Usually, we'd work a long day and book a bit of overtime or loo time to drive to and from meetings without staying over, as we would prefer to be at home even if it meant getting home late. That stopped with immediate effect. We'd only work the mandated 7.5-hour day and then stop to book a hotel and take full advantage of the £25 food and drink allowance for dinner. Then work from home the following day, as we'd been away from home the previous day as per the policy. After about 8 weeks, we were called into a meeting with our line manager and department manager about our expenses. Our expenses for the first month after the cars had been returned were more than they were for the previous 12 months combined. Our line manager agreed that our expenses were in line with the policy, otherwise he wouldn't have signed off on them. The department manager told us we were getting company cars back and he expected the expenses to return to previous levels. We declined the offer of company cars and let management know we'd be adhering to the travel policy to the letter. There was another really short similar story in the comment section for this one from a user called LC Anderton. It says, as a service engineer, a company car was part of my employment contract. When the managing director decided that only company executives were allowed to have cars, I was told I'd have to give mine up. I said sure, but it's part of my salary package, so you're going to have to compensate me. They offered me something laughable like £300. I took it back to the managing director and said, this effectively constitutes a pay cut, which he couldn't do. I'd costed it out that with paying tax on the benefit, it was worth roughly $3,000 a year, plus it worked out I got about 2 months worth of free fuel. So I said, when you're ready to make a serious offer, we'll talk, and I'm looking for £5,000. They offered me £3,500, which I took, which of course they forgot took up my company pension contributions too. And the first time I had to go visit a client, you want me to use my car? Oh, no thank you. Not insured for business use, and I don't want to put that much wear and tear on it. So it meant a hire car every single time I had to go visit a site, which ultimately got charged to the clients who really weren't happy about it. There's some kind of saying that goes along with this, I can't remember it exactly, but it's something like, stepping over dollars to collect all the cents. I mean, these are really just examples of companies that don't do a risk analysis before making a huge policy change. My guess is the people making these changes weren't there in the first place when the company cars were put into place, because if they were, they would have seen why they were given company cars in the first place, likely to save some money on travel expenses, and then they wouldn't have made a change because they would have known that it would have been dumb. Our next story today comes to us from Impressive Pepper 785. Want revenge by paying in pennies? Here, let me count those for you. Let's jump right in. Ages ago, I worked a frontline job at City Hall, registering cars and dogs and collecting money for parking tickets, property taxes, and the like. So, a basic entry-level municipal finance grunt. Bottom of the food chain, nowhere close to being the one making the ordinances or rules, etc. Grunt. This was before the days of taking credit cards and debit cards for such payment, before smartphones, before the online banking world really began. Ages ago. Paper, paper, paper. The city's ordinance on tax interest stated that the interest would accrue daily against any past due tax bill at a rate of blah blah % per annum. Property taxes were due quarterly. Many people would come in to pay cash on the tax due date. Many more would remit their payments by checks through the mail. We kept extremely thorough paper records of all payments received through the mail, retaining their remittance stub, the envelope bearing the postmark, which was the date we would use to calculate any interest if it arrived past the due date. If the postmark was before or on the due date, no interest was charged. These were batched daily by each clerk, filed by date in our vault, so anyone who needed to could find any receipt or remittance fairly quickly. We needed to often, as did the city auditor. Anyway, business as usual, and the few days following the tax due, we would always get a few stragglers through the mail, and the daily interest would have started adding up. Not by a lot. For most homeowners, this would amount to just a few cents a day. We would send them a receipt in the mail with a note that they have a small balance now due to accrued interest, but we would hold it at the amount for 10 days. Most people would just send another check, some would ignore it, and others would come in to pay in person. Finally, the stars aligned and I got one. A real peach of a gentleman who was extremely disgruntled that he got a bill in the mail for this gosh darn interest BS, which he slapped down on the counter inches from my face. He then slammed a repurposed melatonin bottle full of pennies down on the top of the paper and said, "I hope whoever sent me this gosh darn bill has to count these gosh darn pennies," at top volume for all of City Hall to hear. I could tell already that it was mine. I saw my initials on the receipt when he slapped it down. Cue Malicious Compliance. I smiled as big as I could, said I would find out who had processed it, and took his receipt to the vault. I didn't even give him enough time to react. I just got up and went to the vault while cheerfully saying it'll just be a minute before disappearing from his sight. I found the paperwork, including his 2 days late postmarked envelope. Then I sat down at my desk, took the melatonin bottle, looked him in the eye and said, "You're in luck today, sir. I'm the one who sent this balance due to you, so I will be able to count these pennies for you." And I did. I counted all 39 of those gosh darn pennies, and I counted them one by one very thoroughly. It took him about 20 minutes to pay his 39-cent bill, from the minute that bottle hit the counter to the end of it. I was extremely pleasant and cordial and smiling at him the entire time. It was just fun at that point, so I kept pouring it on, just so sweet. His face was practically purple by the end, and as he slunk out the door, without the smug satisfaction he was expecting when he slammed that melatonin bottle on my counter, I said, "Have a great rest of your day, weather's beautiful," and it was. Jumping down to the comment section in this one, there's one from a user called Dorcat. Love that name. It says, "I hope that after counting all the pennies, you counted them again just to be sure, as a good and diligent public servant should, of course." I honestly think there's many ways that OP could have messed around with this person at their counter. When they went into the back, they should have gotten one of their coworkers and said, "Okay, I'm gonna count out these pennies in front of this customer, but when I get about 3/4 of the way through, I want you to come out and interrupt me so that I lose my place and have to start counting them again. And then, once I'm done, I'm gonna tell the guy that I have to have somebody verify it because it's a cash payment, and then have you come back out and count out the pennies one by one too. That's just a couple of the things they could have done, but it would have been so nice to see this one dragged out just a little bit more. Our next story today comes to us from Princesco. Want me to spell your name correctly? Fair game. Let's jump right in. This story took place quite a while ago, but something reminded me of it and I thought I'd share. I was working remotely in a company with coworkers from all over the world, and the culture there was actually quite nice. I really enjoyed everyone I got in contact with, and in all my time there, I'd never experienced any bad blood between anyone. To put simply, everyone was very understanding of each other and open-minded. Enter a guy who I'll call Jose for simplicity. You see, Jose had a special character in his name, something that I'd noticed but never really addressed because why would I? When emailing him, tagging him in different places, etc., his name obviously didn't carry that special character, but he still used it on our messaging platform. One day, I needed to send him a private message, and I started off with a simple, "Hey Jose." He did mention that he'd like me to spell his name correctly, and I honestly thought it was all in good fun, but I explained that I'd never used that character before in writing, my keyboard wasn't set up for it, etc. I thought that was the end of that, but apparently no. I wasn't immediately pulled aside by a higher-up, but during a one-to-one meeting later on, I was told I should be mindful of people's names. I could tell that the person delivering this news wasn't thrilled about it, but the issue had been escalated nonetheless, so they had to remind me. I thought nothing of it since I had very little to do with Jose anyway. But lo and behold, a couple of months later, I had to message him again. This time in a group setting. After a little back and forth, I thanked everyone individually for their input, and because I'd forgotten about the name incident before, I simply said, "Thank you, Jose." You can imagine that during my next one-to-one, this issue was brought up again. This time, I was a little miffed, but I said, "You know what? You're right, I'm clearly in the wrong here." Cue malicious compliance. You see, my name also has a special character, but it's not a frequently seen one since I'm from an Eastern European country. Safe to say that nobody else in the company even knew of its existence. I'd also assured people that they can call me by my English name, which is much easier to pronounce. Well, not anymore. During that same one-on-one, I told my higher-up that I now expect everyone to call me by my correct name, special character, and all. Would you be surprised if I told you that Jose was one of the first to complain that my special character isn't easily accessible on his keyboards? He actually had the audacity to contact me privately to complain that his name was a special case, since it's more widely used, and the special character is well known, whereas mine isn't, and I shouldn't feel special about it. To make matters worse, the next times I had to write down his name, and I made sure I did it often, I didn't actually type it down, and instead copied and pasted it from Google, and it would always, without fail, paste the Wikipedia article about his name too. So my messages look clunky as all heck. Nobody judged me for it, and Jose avoided me like the plague whenever he could. Trouble was, he needed me more than I needed him. So he was forced to suffer by writing out my name properly far more often than I guess he expected. OP added a couple of edits at the bottom. One says, "Edit cause someone mentioned my name might actually be relevant to the story. It's Stefania." Edit number 2, I'd also like to point out that me and Jose were not the only people with special characters in our names. During calls, we all took great care of pronouncing everyone's names as they wanted us to, but in writing, everyone was lax. OP added one final update. It says, "Hopefully final edit. I appreciate everyone giving me tips on how to write all these special characters. A lot of people have brought up tips on how to write several special characters. Some work, some don't on my keyboard, or I end up with completely different results. So I'll do a bit more digging. I've also since saved his name in my directory, so it always autocorrects to the correct spelling. Thanks for those tips as well." That's absolutely one thing I was thinking of right when they said they had a coworker with a special character in their name, that you can set up your autocorrect on your phone to automatically correct that name and put in that special character. That's a really easy fix. In fact, you can actually do that on the computer as well. It's a little more difficult, but the option is still there. This is actually something that intrigued me recently because I've been trying to sell a bunch of baseball cards online, and I'll link my eBay down below if anybody wants to check that out. Please buy them. But the baseball players, a lot of them have special characters in their names, and you see these on their baseball cards themselves, even with some of the hockey players as well. But when you bring up any of the price guides or the sales on eBay, all of those special characters are gone because most people don't know how to search for them by those special characters. So this being said, if entire sports leagues of people with interesting special characters in their names don't care about those special characters being in their names on the price guides or card lists, well, that leads me to believe that OP's coworker is just trying to be a pain in the butt about that special character in their name, especially if they know it's really not that easy to do that on a regular standard keyboard. Our next story today comes to us from IT Co-op, maternity wear. Let's jump right in. This happened several years ago. After onboarding a new job, I was told I could hire an assistant. The HR director, Kelly, handed me a stack of resumes, told me about a friend's daughter, and bumped Kat to the top of my interview list. Kat passed the tech test with high scores and interviewed well, so I hired her. Kat showed up to work on time, had a good attitude, performed well on assignments, and was generally a pleasant person all around. After probation, Kat was excited to tell me that her last raise was enough to get an apartment with her boyfriend. It was a couple months after her raise I started to notice Kelly spending an inordinate amount of time talking to Kat. The convo sounded personal and cordial, and Kelly was friends with Kat's mom, so I didn't think much about it. Until one day, Kelly barges in my office. "Did you know Kat moved into an apartment with her boyfriend?" I might have heard something about that. "Well, Kat is pregnant and her mom is devastated," and proceeds to fill me in on the details on Kat's personal life. Uncomfortably, I interrupt, acting like I have a lot going on. This really isn't any of my business. If there's something related to Kat's performance that we need to discuss, please fill me in, but as for me, Kat's doing a great job. A few months pass. Kat's baby bump is starting to show. Kelly is again in my office. "Kat is not in compliance with the dress code." Last staff meeting, Kelly handed out a dress code policy with a collage of various women's shoes and dresses and suits, presumably cut from fashion magazines, to assist us in determining what was acceptable from what was not. I picked up the policy and the clip art sheets with a stare reminiscent of Jack Nicholson's "I'm of a mind to make some Mookie" Batman Joker scene. Is she wearing something in the "not allowed" clippings as I began to spread the clip art around my desk? "She isn't wearing maternity clothes," as Kelly points to the bullet about maternity clothes in the policy. Well, the policy clearly says maternity wear is allowed. Kat is clearly pregnant and she's wearing clothes, so you know what I mean when I say maternity clothes. Clothes from a maternity store. I told Kelly that I would talk to Kat, which I did. Kat filled me in that there was some drama with her mom not liking her boyfriend, that Kelly is involved, etc., etc. I just told her to read the policy and be sure she complies, and no matter what, to trust me. I had her back. The next day, Kelly is in my office telling me that Kat is again not in compliance with the dress code. At this point, Kelly knows I'm getting frustrated. "Okay, I'll talk to her again. This time, I want you present because I'm going to give her a formal warning and assign remedial training." I bring Kat into my office with Kelly present and formally read off my prepared statement, making it clear that it will go into her permanent file. "Kat, you were given a verbal warning yesterday to comply with this dress code. Because it is not clear to me what is or is not a violation of this policy, you are to report to the HR office 10 minutes early every morning for the next 2 weeks for dress code inspection. Report to me if HR finds your dress unfit. If you are found to be in violation of this policy and are unable to correct your dress before the start of the workday, your employment will be terminated." By the time I'm finished, Kat is tearing up and Kelly is staring at the floor, speechless. I dismiss Kat. I hope that this is the last I hear about this, because if I do, I'll fire her, as Kelly, speechless, walks out of my office. I told Kat not to worry about any of this. We have them where we want them. So for a week, Kat reported to me that her clothes were fine per HR inspection. At the beginning of the second week, she was chuckling. "Kelly told me that I look very nice today." Attitudes began to change and everyone was smiling. I got called to the red carpet by Jim, the CEO. He tried to keep a straight face as he recited what he heard was going on and asked me to cut the remedial training short because it was embarrassing the HR staff. Straight-faced, I said, "Well, Jim, if I stop the remedial training, I'll have to fire Kat. Company policy clearly states that failure to complete a formal remediation plan is immediate termination. It is very clear. There is zero tolerance. You can't fire a pregnant woman for what she wears. I'm asking, no, I'm telling you to stop. Stop following company policy?" Laughing, he concedes, "Okay, I am rescinding that ridiculous dress code policy effective immediately." So let me get this straight. Kelly was going around sharing an employee's personal information with another person in the workplace. Liability, holy crap. Okay, and I know there's stores that specifically sell quote-unquote maternity clothes, but isn't maternity clothes just clothes that somebody who is pregnant wears, regardless of where they get them from? OP, you're honestly a really good person. Somebody who's willing to stand up to the boss above you and be a very good boss yourself at the same time. Kat is honestly very lucky to have you as a supervisor. Our next story today comes to us from Mbilalik. If you don't agree with me, leave right now. Let's jump right in. Here I am again, folks, with another professional malicious compliance. In June of 2021, I joined a tech startup, last mile grocery and food delivery app, as a financial controller. I was told my task is to bring the gross profits into black within a year and before next round of investment and fundraising. The senior team comprised of me, group CFO, COO, and head of grocery. The CEO was stationed outside in another country. The CEO comes to the country within a month of my joining, but does not bother to meet me. I say, "Okay, no problem. Keep your head down and do what you are tasked with." Within 2 months, I have the grips on operations and financials, and I have laid down my plan with the group CFO, and he agrees to it. I make some changes in my team, and I get to working on fixing things. During October, one of our competitors raises $85 million in investment, and our CEO is irked. He comes again and starts an impromptu investment round. The conditions are better than before, so we get an offer of $50 million because our overall plan was a lot smaller and realistic than our competitor. The CEO rejects the offer. He needs an offer of at least $100 million to beat the competitor. Luckily, we got offered $200 million, but the CEO refuses, citing this is greater than what I need, and goes back without accepting anything. Come February, Group CFO suddenly quits, but I knew he quit since our funds were depleting rapidly and the economic conditions in the country and globally were getting worse. I have an emergency meeting with the COO and grocery head and tell them that we need to rationalize our expenses further, and this is the plan, according to which we will be profitable by June 2022. They agree to it and I get to work with my team. The CEO again does not talk to me, and the CFO post remains vacant despite me being next in line and eligible for it. Come March 2022, my plan is on track, and we are expecting profitability a month earlier in May 2022. I plan to take a week-long vacation and travel abroad with my spouse. In the third day of vacations, I get a text from COO that I need to come back as something has happened. I tell him I'll come back as planned and not to worry. I come back and find out that the supply chain team made an error and bought inventory $30 million more than planned for the festive season coming up in May. In my absence, the grocery head gave the go-ahead without consulting me, and the error was only identified once the vendor started fulfilling the order. This has shook our overall plan, and our cash funds are at bottom. Mr. CEO comes to know about this. I was the one to inform him, and he immediately comes down and started literally abusing me and other members of the team verbally. This is his first ever face-to-face meeting with me. I was quite taken aback by his rudeness and hurt as he put all blame on me, saying I am the CFO, when I was never appointed as such, so no payments or purchases were approved by me. They were being approved by COO and the head of grocery. This verbal abuse goes on for about a week, during which I had broken down twice in front of my wife, as I had never faced such horse crap before in my career, and I had worked really hard to bring the company where it was at that point. The CEO warns us that whoever is found guilty of negligence will be fired on the spot. This is where the malicious compliance begins. I prepared detailed documents pointing out my plan and who approved the extra purchase, and how I was consulted only after the error has occurred. I even prepared a plan to sell off the excess inventory and bring the money back in the fold. I try to reach him to explain, but he brushes me off every time, saying you cannot be right. After 7 days, the CEO calls us in office on a weekend. I arrive and head of grocery is there. They're arguing and it is getting heated up. It gets so heated up that the head of grocery shouts back and leaves, citing that he quits. As soon as he leaves, the CEO pounded his fist on the table and shouted, "If you don't agree with me, leave right now. Only I know how to run this company, and if you think I cannot work without you, think again." The moment I heard these words spewing out of his mouth, I switched to autopilot. I type in my resignation, email him right there, get up and say to him, "Please check your email, my notice starts now." I leave the building before he could respond. Immediately, I call up one of my ex-bosses and mentors and tell him I need to meet him. We meet. Within a week, we plan to start our own consultancy firm, and 6 months from then, our firm has started to grow. We're working on our startup, setting up another business, and managing top-tier clients. Then I get a message from that CEO through the COO after a few months of my leaving. "Hey, we need your help managing the books and finances. Our position is really bad." I simply say, the CEO won't agree with what I have to do to fix the company, and I don't work with clients who don't agree with me. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Yerson Black. It says, "I just wonder how the CEO got to that position with his attitude and mindset. Is or was he some sort of trust fund millionaire? OP held on longer than I would have. I think I would have noped out when the CEO insisted on a certain dollar value of investment. That wasn't business, that was pecker measuring." OP responded to this one and said, "You guessed it, he's a big shot hedge fund manager in New York with millions to his name." The sad thing here is that OP put in a lot of time to try and bring the company back from the brink. You know, time, money, effort, sanity, all of that was wasted. At least in OP's new company and being a consultant, they can make all the decisions themselves, do things the way they want to do it, and run their company the way it should be run. Our next story today comes to us from HQX Senberg. Only authorized personnel. Let's jump right in. Background: I work for a kind of ISP doing in-house testing of systems to design new solutions for customers. This sometimes requires an active internet connection, which had to be activated by our airtime department, as it could be quite expensive in theory. Only the accounting part is done by the airtime department. The actual activations is something we can do ourselves, but not allowed to do so without airtime consent. Previously, I had merely asked our local airtime team to activate a system for the duration of the test, then deactivate again once the test was completed. And this is where our story begins. A change from upper management meant that our local airtime department got cancelled, and all its functions were moved back to HQ in another country. This worked out okay for a short time, until someone in management brought in a new boss for the company's airtime department. Meet Power Boss, a new boss with little insight in how operations work, but with extreme desire to make sure every little rule is followed to the letter. Does not matter if it makes sense or not. I quickly started to get a massive dislike towards this boss. We have all sorts of little conflicts. Example 1. I file a request to have a system activated within the current week, as we have a major, one of the biggest companies in the world, customer coming by to see the systems late in the following week. It takes time for the database to fill up once the system is activated, so it's important this is done in good time to allow for this. I hear nothing during the week, but assume all is okay. Until Monday morning, where I found out the system is not activated. For data to fill up, only airtime can do this portion of the activation. I called the airtime department and asked what is going on, why it has not been activated. Power Boss decided to take the activation out of the standard queue to show it to the team for an internal training how to do activations. I am of course furious at this point. Why they have not called me or informed me about this is a major problem. I insist they do this now. PowerBoss informs me that it is his decision and he is okay with this. At this time, I kind of lose it and inform him politely but firmly that he has one job, and that is to ensure that systems get activated, and he best do that job. If not, I will have to take it to his superiors in order for the system to be activated ASAP, so it can be ready for presentation with the potential customer. System gets activated during that day, but the following day I learned from one of the upper management bosses that PowerBoss had reached out to HR and threatened to file a personal harassment case against me. HR denied this though, as they saw no reason for it. I'm like, WTF? A harassment case over asking someone to do their job? Cue example 2 and the malicious compliance. I need an urgent activation of a system, and for this we, with the new system, have to file activation reports with all details. Quite tedious for something purely internal and temporary. Nonetheless, I do this and send it over. It gets rejected by PowerBoss because it has not been signed by one of the VPs, who are the only ones authorized to activate a system for a customer with a write-off in the thousands of US dollars. Though it is kind of a theoretical thing, as the internal cost is virtually nothing. I try to argue that it is quite a lot of work to chase down a VP for a signature when it is a very limited time and purely internal. PowerBoss denies this and says very firmly, only people on the list in the bottom of the activation form are allowed to approve this. Your name is not on this list, so you cannot approve. Talk to a VP. It takes time, but I chase down a VP in another country and get him to sign the document and get the system activated. A couple of weeks later, PowerBoss is in our new call center in Asia, out to do a demonstration on how the systems work and what it looks like in real time. Turns out that PowerBoss needs a system activated and calls in and requests this. By some stroke of absolute luck, I pick up the phone. Hello, I need system XX activated. Do you have a signed activation form? I don't need one. I am telling you to activate the system. According to yourself, all activations must have an activation form. Fine, I'm sending it in now. I do not see any signature on this form. It needs to be approved by a VP. But I am head of airtime. This is me writing these forms. I decide who can approve and who cannot. Your name is not listed on the form as one of the people who are allowed to approve. Clearly that's a mistake on the form. Just activate. Only authorized personnel can do this. Your name is not on the list. Fine. Then hangs up. My gosh, it felt good. PowerBoss obviously complained to one of the VPs about this, but they merely shrugged and said that he himself had made the rules and the documents, that I was merely following the rules that he himself had set. Hilarious. OP added an edit onto the bottom of the story. It says, edit, it has been 5 to 6 years since that incident. I have been promoted, so the amount of interactions I have with PowerBoss is extremely limited. When he does write to me requesting whatever, I simply ignore all his emails. I have made it a thing to never respond to any email he sends out, or if I do respond, I remove him from the trail. This seems to have worked quite well, as I have zero conflicts with him. Jumping to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Kaylane. It says, I approve of the edit to include more information that was given in a comment reply to someone, and it's also a delicious piece of malicious compliance. I can understand that rules are rules, and I'm mostly very stringent with regards to them myself, but I also know that sometimes it's a lot more efficient to be able to go outside the rules to get some temporary work done. OP responded to this comment and said this is very true. Sometimes rules must be rules, but also stop and think sometimes. Why are the rules in place, and does it always make sense? Does the rule help my workplace function better, just not in my silo but the company as a whole? I think many rules should be considered in a holistic view, and not just from an individual department's point of view. Could improve work efficiency in many companies. In the same company when I was fresh and just hired, we attended a meeting with the CEO at the time who was explaining new procedures. I politely asked if the new procedures were a good thing, as while it certainly did provide better workflow for tech department, it would create a massive workload for the accounting team. CEO response, why do you care? It's not your department. That totally miffed me. Yeah, I don't understand that one myself, because if something gets backed up in one department, it causes a backup in another related department, which sooner or later is going to back up and cause some trouble for that CEO. Let's be honest here though, the majority of us listening to this don't have the, berries to actually stand up to somebody higher up in a company. I think that's one of the reasons why we like these stories so much, because they go over the things that we would love to do, but would never actually do ourselves. Our next story today comes to us from Emperor Buttman. We don't care how understaffed you are, every customer must get priority service. Let's jump right in. This was a while ago before I managed to claw my way out of the hotel industry. Used to work in a hotel with about 1,000 rooms. All employees were being cross-trained when I came on board, which essentially meant rather than hiring enough people, every idle 5 minutes was to be spent helping one of the other drowning departments. Most of my time was either dedicated to service or reception, but we got plenty of housekeeping and tech department odd jobs thrown our way too. This was pretty normal since tech were by far the smallest department, around 3 people for 1,000 cheaply constructed rooms, and housekeeping was also tiny for the impossible amount of work they had to do. So what duties could be expected in reception? Replace door batteries, light bulbs, unclog drains, restock tea and coffee, coffee makers, kettles, hair dryers, TP, anything guests were missing or ran out of after they checked in. Room service for any COVID isolation cases, ticket stubbing for events, manning the bar, garage duties. There was a whole rental thing going on, and property return rentals were a rarity. Anything else that was flung at us with the label urgent, like room tours and occasionally even making our own staff lunches. Ignoring our repeated requests to cut down the number of available rooms until we had enough staff to actually provide the service we advertised, management also informed us we were there to placate the after-sales cases, disgruntled customers rightly pissed off that they didn't get what they're promised. So after months of going by the book, I finally found myself a comfortable little loophole. Any tech or housekeeping issue was obviously higher priority than reception, since for example, not having toilet paper or working lights, drains, and doors was an unacceptable condition for guests. So waiting 2 hours to be checked in or book breakfast was preferable by far. Having 2 to 3 receptionists on shift to man 3 phones, email, scanners and printers for guest registrations, yeah, we still had one foot in the 90s, and troubleshoot reservations, one of us would be on the desk checking people in. If another was available, they'd be on digital responses, just taking one call after another while working through emails, and I would take every single tech and housekeeping job that came. If any of us received complaints, we'd explain the situation. I'm sorry, but there's currently an emergency, insert technical HSK issue here, that will have to take priority. If you'd be so kind as to wait in line until my colleague comes back, he'll see to you upon his return. I'm pretty resilient when I don't give an F anymore, so I told them to put any difficult guests in my line too, unless their problem was high priority. Whenever I got back, I'd have 30 minutes to 2 hours to work through the line before the next thing would come up and I'd apologetically leave. When they demanded an explanation or just started yelling, I'd simply explain our duties and say I fully agree that this is not a comfortable condition for guests to be in, and they in turn would agree that providing toilet paper and other essentials needed to come first. Naturally, wanting to provide all customers with the tools to improve their future experience, I always rounded off these kinds of conversations with a warm thank you and an "if you can think of any suggestions that might improve yours and other guests' future experiences here, please let us know on TripAdvisor." Feedback of any nature is always valuable to us. Reviews came flooding in that were either talking about a massive dip in quality or how understaffed and poorly managed the place was. But funnily enough, I never heard one bad word against the staff. Management didn't make a big change to the hiring policy, so I eventually left. But last I heard, almost everyone had quit not long after I did, and the place has since rebranded, presumably to get away from the rating that dropped a couple stars. Jumping down to the comment section in this one, there's one from a user called Indigo0331 that I completely agree with. It says, "If every customer is getting priority service, no customer is getting priority service. Another way to look at this is if management says that every single thing is a priority, the employees are going to look at it and be completely overwhelmed not knowing what to do first. There should be a clear-cut set of priority tasks that take place before other tasks. It's like if you're trying to put on your socks and shoes. You can't put on your socks and shoes at the same time. Socks must go on before shoes. But in an emergency, you can don your shoes and forego your socks. Thus, socks are not a top priority task. But they are nevertheless a task that should be performed, and they must be done before the shoes, unless you're hellbent on effing up royally. Our next story today comes to us from a shellfish lover. All of this over a couple of envelopes? Let's jump right in. I caught COVID early due to the work I do. Unfortunately, that meant that what little help would come for others during the lockdowns and such didn't happen. I had been ready to move before, but the job fell through and my old boss was great letting me come back, go to a full work from home setup, and checking in when needed. Still, a lot of stuff fell to the wayside. Unfortunately, due to my hobbies, I ran afoul of a postal worker. I collect and trade cards, mostly magic stuff. As such, I get a lot of packages and had developed rapport with my previous mail carrier about all of the weird towns and even out-of-the-way countries I would sometimes receive a package from. When I got sick, Manuel would bring my mail to me, and we commiserated a lot. Manuel was a good dude, an immigrant who made his way, raised 3 lovely boys, and got into the USPS and stayed to retirement. Then came Sandra. Sandra was the epitome of the type of personality I hated in that city. Loud and proud about being ignorant, but pushy whenever proven wrong. When I realized I hadn't received my mail for a week, I checked in with the post office. Manuel and I had been informal, so paperwork would take weeks to file. Until then, I got someone to help out, but Sandra had already emptied my box and marked it for pickup. Pickup I couldn't do. When I finally got my stuff, a lot of trades that had arrived were now missing. I put it down for theft, but Sandra was the type to just be negligent. She had the look of that middle school teacher who would swear down is up and fail you for daring to look like her ex-husband. It took a lot of haranguing, but I got the approval for direct delivery in my little community. Put up my box on my door, and then got a knock on the door. Smug Sandra, her hand out with 3 letters. This one had to be manually run, that cost 35 cents. Now, I'd received and sent hundreds, maybe thousands of pieces of cardboard cracked from this address over the years. I had a manual run twice, and it wouldn't be a big deal, but after months of not going out, no cash for COD. I tried being nice, understanding, but Sandra would give no quarter. So I wheeled myself to dig up 2 quarters in my junk drawer, and came back to Sandra looking Karen-y at my neighbor Bill. Maybe she thought he was the wrong color tone for the neighborhood. I gave her the 2 quarters, and she accosted me for another 5 minutes about how she doesn't carry change. How dare I expect? I was just about done. Then she asked what was in the package. Oh, just some card game stuff. I never knew adults played that crap. I can take stupidity, rigidity to rules. Hell, I'll take someone having a bad day. But mocking my cardboard? Nah. I asked if maybe I could give over a bill. She could write a receipt. I knew that businesses had that sort of thing. She said I'd have to come in, and I couldn't at that time, as I was solo without a handyvan. No electronic option to open an account either. Okay, that's fine. I'll call someone, get them to bring some quarter rolls, do a Venmo with them, and we're good. Then 5 more trades failed to come in, and the note on the door was that she missed me. My work from home stuff was set up in the next room, and I had a doorbell. When I finally asked, she said she had no time to deal with me as she was busy. So I decided to make time. I called my boss and asked if he could cover me for $5 in pennies. I reached out to one of my common trade pals and asked for very specific trades, and waited. About a week later, Sandra came to me with a whole parcel of manually sorted mail, all from the same address, 10 envelopes, and I had 7 rolls of pennies that I cracked open and counted, slipping a few times while in the rain. During that time, I explained all of the fun postal regulations I had learned about, my interest in bricks, and how with priority mail, I can use the post office to send my collection. That you can secure a tag on any number of difficult to maneuver, yet sturdy enough to get through the post items. A dozen or more small inconveniences I had found that, given my condition and pettiness, would ruin a day. I forgot my count a few times, wouldn't want to shortchange the poor carrier, right? We spent about an hour, me taking up the one spot of dry real estate near my door. I would have invited her in, but regulations, am I right? I'm such a stickler for the rules. After that event, my malicious compliance was rewarded with a call from the local post office, explaining that I would be alright moving forward, and my address was noted. I offered to pay the fees. I could afford the occasional 35 cents for my hobby. They declined, and I never saw Sandra again. I moved shortly after, keeping the work from home job but wanting to be closer to family. And now, my new carrier is aces with my needs. I have my mailbox right on my door. Glorious. In the comment section for this one, there was a lot of people saying things like, you can mail up to 70 pounds in a flat rate priority box, and then this postie has to carry that, and you can just deny it when it comes up to the door, so they have to continue to take it with them. Now, that wouldn't work where I live because any parcels are delivered by a van that drives up and down the road and just does parcels. They're not actually carried by the mail carriers. So I'd like to know from you guys, in the areas that you live in, do your mail carriers deliver parcels as well, or are they delivered by a specific person driving around your neighborhood, or do you have to go to the post office to actually pick them up? Because I know some rural areas act that way. Yeah, I don't really understand the postie in this case. I mean, I sell baseball and football and hockey cards myself online, and the posties have no problem delivering things to my house at any time. Sometimes that can be 15 packages coming in at the same time. Never had a problem, so I don't really get that. Our next story today comes to us from Viva Ibiza. Restaurant only gives discount on phone orders? Okay then, let's jump right in. I only live 5 minutes walk away from a local pizza place, so I went in and ordered direct to takeaway. I didn't call ahead as I didn't see much point as I lived so close and I didn't mind the extra couple of minutes. While there, I saw they were doing a special offer, 10% discount if you mentioned their promotion over the phone, and then went in to collect takeaway. I know I haven't called in first, but now I know you do a discount if you do. And to save us both the hassle of me calling you right now, and for the fact I know the promotion exists, can I still get the 10% off anyway? No, it's for telephone orders only. Sure, I get that. But I could literally just call you right now from my mobile, and you'd give me the discount, but that'd be a bit weird to make me do that. So can I just get it anyway? No, it's for telephone orders only. This job's worth attitude pissed me off. So I was literally about to just forget about buying anything from there and go somewhere else. But as I got outside, I figured that no, I'd just stand outside and call the number on their door and order a pizza that way to get my discount. The phone rang and the same guy picked it up. Can I order a pizza to collect with 10% discount, please? He recognizes my voice, obviously, as it's just been 15 seconds since we were speaking inside. He looks outside at me, I smile and wave. He looks pissed off that he has to give me my discount now. He takes my order and says it will be 10 minutes. During the next 10 minutes while waiting for my discounted pizza, someone else is about to come in the restaurant to order a takeout. I asked them if they have phoned ahead for the discount or not. They didn't realize that was a thing. No problem, buddy. I'll do it for you. What do you want? I call the same number again. Same guy answers and hears my voice again and looks straight at me again. I smile and wave again and proceed to order this random stranger's pizza order for them whilst maintaining eye contact with him. My friend would also like the 10% telephone discount. He looks like he's going to pop a blood vessel, but has no choice but to accept it. After all, I didn't enforce the rules, he did. A week later, the telephone order discount is cancelled completely, and it's simply given if you have a menu, and there are menus in the entrance anyway, so you'd be crazy not to see it and use it. OP added an edit onto this story. It says, well, that blew up, answering a few of the main questions here. This happened a while ago, so the promotion wasn't to do with Google Ads, or tracking info, or storing numbers, etc. It was just a badly executed promo that forced you to call to the very person stood in front of you already taking your order anyway if you wanted the discount. No, not been waiting 15 years to tell this story like I'm some sort of legend and my life peaked at that moment. I read something else on Reddit yesterday and I was like, oh yeah, I remember something like that happening to me, and I've never posted in MaliciousCompliance before, so why not share? The guy behind the counter wasn't a kid with management breathing down his neck. He may have even been the owner or manager for all I know. It was a small place and not a chain. And if it wasn't just him there doing everything, then it was only him and the chef. So making me call him on the phone in front of him was him enforcing the stupid rule. I just complied with it. I agree, I risked a spat on pizza. I don't suggest pissing people off who make your food. It was not something I was thinking of at that time though. OP, I think you missed a golden opportunity. I would have pulled my phone out while standing at the counter and would have made that phone call standing right in front of that person. And then when they tried to talk to me directly, I would shush them and tell them I'm on the phone. Then I'd go back to my phone and say, sorry about that, this idiot keeps on interrupting me. Now I'd like to order a pizza with a 10% discount please. Bonus points for dragging out even further and paying over the phone, but having to rummage around through your wallet to find the card for a couple of moments before reading it out to them, directly in front of them inside the store. Oh come on, there was so many things you could have done here, OP. Our next story today comes to us from Pedantic Dullard. You want a smile policy? Let's make sure we're in compliance. Let's jump right in. Making my own post about this after being inspired by a previous post and prompted to do so by others. I worked at a casino years back as a slot host. We helped people with their machines, answered questions, paid jackpots, and were a huge customer impact point. It was really a fun job, despite the awful customers, and many years later, I'm still friends with my old coworkers. One day, management had the bright idea to mandate smiling, even if we weren't physically interacting with customers. Surveillance had been engaged to photograph and report incidences of employees not smiling. We could be written up or even terminated if we had sufficient repeat offenses of failing to smile. During normal business, we would radio surveillance to report tips or found money, any cash that wasn't staying with the casino, or when we accessed the secure machine base for coins, pre-automated tickets, or a select few other reasons. We started calling them on the radio to verify a smile or report a potential violation of the new smiling policy. We would warn the coworker first, that way they could have a huge fake smile ready for the camera. Slots to the Eagle, can you verify a potential violation of the smile policy? There's a group of 3 standing near slot bank location. I can't see smiles from my location. The potential violation had to be recorded, the picture printed, and signed by managers. The policy ended after a few weeks. Surveillance complained to the gaming board that they couldn't enforce the new policy and protect the casino's assets. An eye in the sky, Buddy said off the record. They had been buried in dozens of smile violations each shift, and it actually affected the property security. Managers couldn't do anything to us either to stop us from reporting it. It was specifically written it was an expectation of our job to report suspected department and property policy violations for documentation and investigation. Because they'd made it a written policy, if they told us to stop calling surveillance, they'd be asking us to violate policy, which would then warrant an investigation. Jumping down to the comments on this one, there's one from a user called Mr. Hodge2. It says, mandatory team building trip to see the movie Smile. OP responded to this one and said, oh no, for that, managers came up with something else. Not kidding, in our pre-shift stand-up for a little while, they made us play hot potato and the telephone pass the phrase game. I refused to play hot potato on the grounds I had graduated elementary school and didn't want to be treated like a child. I played telephone because we completely mangled it, much to our own delight. On a serious note, we didn't need team building BS like that. We were all great friends already. We'd go to the bars together after work, we'd go to worlds of fun, we were very much close friends. I had to work on my last Christmas there. I wasn't sad because I truly was spending it with people I loved, and almost 20 years later, still consider some of my closest friends. Oh, that is the one thing I absolutely hate about big companies, is these quote-unquote team-building events. They even bussed us off to one at one point, and we had to sit down in this group of people, people from other stores that we didn't even know. But yet we had to do a team building event where we were doing things with these other teams, with people we don't know and will never be working with, because that makes a whole lot of sense. You know somebody in the corporate office is patting themselves on the back for putting that policy into place because it's going to bring people together and everything's going to run more efficiently. Meanwhile, the employees are sitting back and going, wow, whoever came up with this is a butthole. Our next story today comes to us from Rye on the Rocks. You want me to make a patient stay late so you can skip work during the snow and you refuse to stay late? Fine, now you have to stay late every day. Let's jump right in. Once upon a time, I worked in a research hospital coordinating drug studies. This one's gonna go against the grain of some of the stories here. When you work in healthcare, following the written laws and rules to the letter is of the utmost importance. We run into trouble when people begin inventing their own rules and playing by them. The hardest part of my job was convincing other departments to also do their jobs. And sometimes, it was like pulling teeth asking people to perform their duties even at a basic level. Ask a nurse to draw a basic 4-tube blood kit, you got an eye roll. Ask the pharmacy to stay 5 minutes past the end of the workday? Nope, they couldn't do that. They were out at 4:30. That second scenario is the important one for the purposes of this story. That department refuses to stay late. I could understand why they'd feel that way and strive to maintain as steady a schedule as possible. But in the world of sick and dying people, sometimes things came up. Mind you, I regularly had to stay an hour or two past the end of my shift to take care of problems and data entry. We could get overtime pay or flex our schedules pretty easily, at least in my department. This hospital was in a very snowy metropolitan area, and one time years ago, we were projected to get a massive blizzard. Every one of us, the nurses, the physicians, the pharmacists, and the coordinators were essential employees, or whatever they called it before COVID popularized the term, and had to come in regardless of the weather. So every one of us should have been planning to be there the next day, even if the weather was awful. We had to call in sick if we missed work for weather reasons. The afternoon before the storm was due to begin, we had a patient in clinic. Typically, patients on this particular research study got a doctor's appointment and then treatment immediately after. However, this individual had a job that made him prefer getting his clinic visit done in the afternoon and his treatment early the next morning. It was unusual, but it wasn't hard to accommodate him. While most of us had accepted our fate of driving in the snow the next morning, the investigational drug department was especially not too excited about the prospect of having to come in during the blizzard. So at 3:30, an hour before the pharmacy closes, they send me a Slack message and ask us what the possibility of doing this patient's treatment today might be so they don't have to come in for it tomorrow. Really? You're asking us now? This was on your docket all day. Anyhow, I begrudgingly went to find the patient in the waiting room and ask. He wasn't thrilled but says he'll do it if he has to. I let the pharmacy know. Then they asked me what the status of the patient was. Clinic was running behind as usual and we hadn't cleared the patient for treatment yet. The investigational pharmacy needed at least 20 minutes to prep the drugs needed, so they told us we had until 4 p.m. to get them the signed order. The process for getting a drug order filled involved getting a signed order from a doctor after a patient has been cleared to get a drug, walking it outside across the street to the pharmacy, handing the signed prescription to a pharmacist, waiting for the drug, walking it back to the patient in the first building. This was absolutely not going to happen in 12 minutes. At 4:01, pharmacy sent me a very rude Slack message indicating that I basically missed my window to get the patient in today and I should do a better job next time. As coordinator, you get blamed for absolutely everything, even if it was the fault of a doctor who was bad at time management. Their message said something along the lines of, if you don't come up and give a pharmacist the order by 4:05, there's nothing we can do for your patient. In the future, you should get the order signed and over to us ahead of time so we can prep it. Ahead of time in this case meant that a patient would be prescribed a drug but wasn't yet cleared by a doctor to receive that drug. In my training, the pharmacy director told us we were never ever supposed to do this. It was a humongous no-no and would be grounds for a massive lawsuit if anything went wrong. You absolutely don't prep a drug unless the patient receiving it is cleared for treatment by a physician. I really liked the pharmacy director, and I messaged her regularly with questions about drugs patients might be considering while on study, but she wasn't super involved in the day-to-day of the pharmacy workers and tended to focus on bigger picture tasks, hence why her employees were inventing their own rules and demands. So I'm supposed to get this patient in today, right now, eh? Alright, if you insist. So I got the order signed by the physician ahead of seeing the patient. They didn't really give a crap. Next step, in the words of the person who messaged me, was to take it to a pharmacist, eh? You said I had to take it to a pharmacist by 4:05, right? What if, instead of walking it directly to the pharmacy, I took it directly to the pharmacy director? She was still a pharmacist and could do everything the folks in the investigational drug dispensary could do. I told her that we hadn't cleared this patient, but I had been urged by pharmacy to dispense the drug anyhow, so that the patient wouldn't have to come in tomorrow for their treatment. She looked puzzled and asked if the patient was rescheduled while in clinic. I told her no, this was at the request of the pharmacy staff, so they wouldn't have to come in during a snowstorm. I showed her the message her employee had sent me. Pharmacy director was unhappy with this and said someone would just have to stay late if this was the plan. I referred her to the Slack message that said I had missed my window because they didn't plan to stay late. Director was livid and told me that she personally was going to stay late to make sure this went through. We went to the pharmacy from her office and she intended to scold this employee, but of course, everyone was gone. So the two of us went and got the drug at 4:35, and I got it back to the patient. I got a call from him a week later indicating that he actually preferred getting Thursday afternoon treatment instead of having it on Friday morning, and wanted to keep that schedule going forward. I relayed this to the head of the pharmacy. I expressed uncertainty with how we'd handle this, and she said she'd get back with me. We all got an email a few days later saying that the investigational drug department would now be staying open until 5:30. And one person would be staying late every day, rotating every day, so that someone could cover late drug orders. But I knew she only had 3 pharmacists, and they were all salaried, not hourly, which meant some of them would be covering more than 1 late hour a week. I went to get this patient's next dose of drugs a few weeks later at about 4:45. The same woman who'd asked me to break the rules was working. I asked how she was doing, and she told me she was having to work 3 4:30 to 5:30s a week, presumably because she tried to act unethically a few weeks prior. She handed me the pill bottle and slammed the window in my face. And to think, if the pharmacist would have just shut up and done their jobs like they were supposed to and come in during one snowstorm, they'd still be able to leave at 4:30 every day. If you work in healthcare or health research, don't make your own rules, kids. Jumping down to the comment section in this one, we have one from a user called Stabmaster. Ooh. Not everyone can get flex time, and some people get nothing but crap for staying even 1 minute into OT. Plus, if it's anything like some of the places I've worked for, staying 5 minutes once means that everyone tries to get you to keep doing that, then 10, then 15, etc. That said, the way they handled that, especially the berating you for something that per their own policies was straight up not allowed, was especially crap to the bull level. If you're there until 4:30, then don't be angry if you have things that keep coming in until then. Especially don't be rude to people that have the full ability to go over your head and get you called out for when you are blatantly breaking a rule. Entitlement blinds everyone eventually, I guess. OP replied to this comment and said, "And that's the thing. I feel for these people and agree that their time should be respected. But this is going to keep happening, so something needs to be put in place on their end. Patients can't just not get a drug because they can't get their act together." OP, I think you mentioned in your post that you get flex and overtime, but the pharmacist didn't, so why would they want to work extra time for free? I'm not quite understanding that part of the story. Yes, I know you need to get the drugs to them, but somebody higher up isn't paying them to be there for that extra time. In a lot of industries and not just pharmacy work, there's always going to be quote-unquote emergencies or late orders, and honestly, I can see their point of view in just wanting to close down when their time is done and leave. Let's open this up to comments though. Everybody who's listening to this right now, if you could comment down below and let me know what you think. Do you think that the pharmacist should have been guilted into staying later, or that OP took the right route in making them all have to stay later, regardless of whether they want to or not? Our next story today comes to us from No Language 7256. Unsuitable. Let's jump right in. Some background. I'm in Australia, I'm currently a 32-year-old male, and this occurred this year. I used to do admin work in defense, and during that time, I got rather qualified and experienced, specifically in people management and training people. I then left the uniform for various reasons, including depression caused by my time there. I got a new job and intentionally got a position way below my capabilities so I could focus on my mental health while still working. It was a hotline for a government assistance program. This position was good for about 4 years. Over that time, I started using some of my skills more and built up my confidence again. I also was acting in higher positions almost the entire time. Initiating incident. So after all the COVID lockdowns finally finished, there was a permanent spot in a higher position available. By this time, I was the longest serving person remaining in the team, and I was the most qualified. I knew they planned on getting the incumbent to do 2 roles, both of which I knew thoroughly. Went through the interview process, answered all the questions, explained how I could do the role immediately without training, etc. Had to wait a few weeks to find out the result, since it's still government and they don't do these things super fast. Then I got told that I was found not suitable. I was floored. I asked for an explanation, and all I was told was it was a very competitive round. When I asked what I could have done to be more competitive, I got the same answer. To make things worse, they asked me to train the guy who got the role. Immediately, I brought up the duty statement, which had the list of tasks for my role. Remember, it's super easy. Basically, just answer the phone and reply to emails. I also got out the public service level expectations and highlighted the appropriate bits for my level. Cue malicious compliance. Since I wasn't suitable to work at higher levels, I immediately stopped all work that wasn't at my level or in my job description. To say this put a dent into the extra work I was doing would be an understatement. I used to help out management with sorting out interpersonal disputes. I used to run a bunch of reports to find and sort out work that was missed. And I used to help the other teams do their work. So at this point, my days became super easy. I would do about 10% of what I used to, as that 10% was my actual job. The training I was doing was directing the guy to the procedures, and if he had questions, directing him to ask his supervisor. It was about a week of this before management noticed the training wasn't very in-depth. One by one, they asked me what was going on. Our structure had 6 supervisors at that time. Each and every time I said the same thing. Unfortunately, I was found unsuitable for the role, so I can't teach someone how to do it. To say they were pissed would also be an understatement, but they tried to stay professional. They then started questioning why I stopped doing all the extra work that I had been doing for years. I directed their attention to my duty statement and asked where it lists that work. They said the extra duties as directed. I then asked how that aligns with the level expectations, which are surprisingly clear and helpful. At this point, most stopped trying. During all this sudden free time I had, I started to search for a new job. It only took 2 weeks to go for interviews, be found suitable, and get a new job. Apparently, I'm incredibly competitive at this level. Who knew? The fallout. The new job is significantly easier, at the level I was unsuitable for, and gives me much more money than they were offering. Additionally, I have kept in touch with some people there. The management are floundering as interpersonal problems are cropping up. The team can't keep up with the workload, and at least 3 more people have gotten new jobs, with at least 2 looking for other employment, leaving 1 person left in the hotline team that will know what they're doing. It's a shame really, because I like that program and probably would have stayed for a long time. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Not So Chi Couple. It says, I've heard this before. Management sees someone doing great at their job and don't want to promote them out of it because they would lose a valuable person in that position. What they always forget is that if they decide someone is that important, you have to keep them happy. Raises, title changes, accolades, try something. It isn't that hard. OP responded to this comment and said, "The worst part is that the higher position was still in the same team doing one of the roles I had been acting in for the previous 4 years. My actual role was more of a demotion at that point. OP, what you did was perfect. Sometimes management needs to be taught a lesson that if they don't promote you, then all the extra things you're doing that aren't in your job description just aren't going to be done, and they're going to realize how valuable you are to the company. The other option you have is to pack your bags and move on, which is exactly what you did. So I think this was the best outcome you could have hoped for. You got into a better position for better pay at a different company, doing exactly what you want to do. Well done, OP." Our next story today comes to us from Nutella Zamboni. Dress code violation A. I'll follow it to the letter then. Let's jump right in. Someone suggested I make this a topic and post of its own, so my all-male high school had a business professional dress code, and it was the early 90s, so there were a lot of options as far as color, style, fit, etc. I got a detention for not wearing a belt, but my dress pants had a built-in belt made of the same fabric as the pants. The disciplinarian wouldn't budge because the dress code said belt had to be leather, so off to detention I went. Cue me thinking of how to maliciously comply, and my grandfather was a master tailor who would do anything for me. I went to big and tall clearance section and bought the ugliest, loudest, and biggest rayon shirt and pants I could find. My grandfather darted the shirt in as many places as he could. He took in the pants so much the pockets touched the center back seam, put 3-inch cuffs on them, pleats on the back, and tapered the ankles to 8 inches with a huge break. When he was done, he had me try it on and gave me an orange leather belt to go with them. I can't even begin to tell you how many neon colors were on the shirt. Pants were a muted olive green, orange belt, hideous multicolored argyle socks, white patent leather slip-on dress shoe, and since it was winter, I paired it with a 70s chocolate brown pleather trench coat. I went to school strutting like a peacock. Disciplinarian takes one look at me and tells me to get in his office. While in his office, he asks me if I think the dress code is a joke, to which I tell him absolutely not. I don't want to get in more trouble for violating it, which is why I'm in dress code. He looks like he's about to flip his crap when he realizes, because he knows the book like the back of his hand, that the dress code says all clothes must be properly fitted and tailored. Dress pants or khaki style pants, shirts can be long sleeve or short with a collar, dress socks to be worn at all times, dress shoes or boat shoes, and a leather belt must always be worn. There's more, but it applies to turtlenecks, jackets, blazers, and sweaters. He's looking at me with his eyes twitching and asks me if I know how ridiculous I look. I told him that I think I look awesome, and I have a well-tailored fitting outfit with a leather belt, dress socks, and shoes. He says, "But you don't come close to matching." I ask him where it says we have to match in the dress code. He tells me to get the F out of his sight. Down in the comment section of this one, there's one from a user called Cayman718. It says, "I hope he understood that your colorful outfit was the result of his enforcing the leather belt aspect of the dress code to the letter, instead of accepting the belt that was part of your original pants." OP replied to this comment and said he did. He and I got along famously for 4 years, and he got a kick out of how much I would stretch the limits of things. Another example is our hair couldn't touch our collar. I slicked my hair back so you really couldn't tell how long it was, but it all got to a point where it was below my collar. He reminded me that my hair was touching my collar, and I told him I would fix it as soon as I could. So I got a really tight perm, and I looked like B Real from Cypress Hill when he had a fro. Our next story today comes to us from Lucy Ha. Boss wants to cut off all employees and workers from their email access over the weekend, but doesn't understand the consequences. Let's jump right in. Hello everyone, this is my first post here and wanted to share my greatest work story. My native language isn't English, so please excuse when my grammar is a bit simple. The story starts with me and my company. I'm a 30-year-old businesswoman who works in an IT service in a bank space. I'm the girl for everything basically, but I'm a specialist for first level support, administration, and backup, sometimes even networking. Even though I'm not head of my IT department, I basically had all the responsibilities of them. But unfortunately, my pay grade doesn't reflect that at all. I think of my boss of my IT department as kinda lazy, if not incompetent. He even brags about getting so much money for basically doing nothing. I have a 40-hour week, but since the whole IT department is my responsibility, I need to keep track of the servers and maybe problems that can occur 24/7. This is mostly done via emails. When the server status gives out a warning or a failure, I will get notified, and then I'm fixing the problem over remote desktop or going to the company itself, even in my free time. I wouldn't mind this, but I'm not getting paid for this. But on the other hand, I'm getting punished when something is going wrong. My boss's boss wasn't that much better. Since it was a fancy bank, everyone should be in a suit the whole time to let it look professional, best with a skirt and high heels. Only problem is, when you work in the first level support, you need to do a lot of behind the scenes work, like slipping under the desk to do or repair cable management, doing work on the server rack, and doing lots of other activities that makes you dirty. You can imagine that this wore out my business clothes really fast. And not only that, they were so impractical and really made my work harder. So I changed my clothes to a comfy hoodie and work pants to fit the work I'm doing a bit better. When my boss saw me, he was furious, demanded I can't look like a poor hobo inside his bank. I told him that I demand work clothes for both occasions because they are expensive and get worn out quickly. He refused, and I wasn't really happy about this. So much for the introduction. Someday, my boss's boss, head of the whole company, called me. He had a plan. He wanted to create quiet hours, means he didn't want his employees working on weekends to let them rest properly. At first glance, you could say, hey, that's a nice idea. Yeah, no, he just didn't like to pay them for overwork because he got in some legal trouble with overwork paying in general. Not only that, some employees have strict deadlines and need the extra time to get work done. To actively ensure nobody can work over the weekend, he wanted the following. Please make sure no one can access their emails and remote desktop over the weekend. No exceptions. Since we had a ticket system and been able to attach emails to tickets, I asked him to write an official work task. This has two reasons. First, I like everything documented. Second, I have something to protect and secure myself if the task I was given is incorrect. And it's exactly this that saved me. So I was in my office desk again, thinking how to get the task done and what implication it will have. And then it was clear to me what it meant. The email came from my boss with the task, and indeed, he wrote, "For everyone, no exceptions." I was thinking to myself, should I write them the implications it would have? After thinking, I thought of how I'm treated as a worker, and I decided against it. I was working immediately at this task and made an automated process to block every access to emails after Friday 6 p.m. to Monday 6 a.m. Weekend came and it was Saturday, and I was calm and relaxed because if you've not noticed by now, by cutting down everyone's emails means of course that I don't receive any updates on the servers. I can't possibly work on it because my remote access is also cut, of course. If you think you could forward your work email address to your private address, no, I can't, because we have a very strict data protection. Nothing is allowed to go out. I'm happy. It's still Saturday, middle of the day. I'm cooking myself and my husband a nice meal, and my telephone rings. It's my boss's boss. He talks with a stressed voice and told me that he can't access his emails. I needed a second to process this, but I responded, that doesn't surprise me at all, since you ordered me to cut everyone's email access without exceptions. He was angry, very angry, and told me that this obviously doesn't count for him. I told him that he specifically told me that there are no exceptions, and he stated everyone. He then argued that this wasn't how he phrased it, so I reread him his own email. After that, he was silent for a moment. He noticed his flaw in his logic. I broke the silence and asked him, "Sir, if you still want access to your emails on the weekend, that's no problem. Please send me a request per email and I will work on it first thing on Monday." A bit angry again, he replied that he wants to have it done immediately, and I calmly explained to him that I can't do this since my remote access is also blocked like he ordered. He hung up. 10 minutes later, he calls me again. He asks me calmly if I can fix the problem right now when he pays me for my overwork. He also wants me to be available at any time, means I should receive my emails and be able to remote work, and that this will raise my pay grade by a lot. I thought that this is the perfect opportunity. I agree to that condition and pay raise, but only when my coworkers and I finally get work clothes. He agreed. Since then, my work situation drastically improved, and mostly only because I maliciously complied, well aware of the consequences of the given task. Thanks for reading. OP added a couple of edits down at the bottom of the story. The first one says, "Edit, thank you so much for all your comments and love. I'm glad you liked it." Edit number 2 says, "I want to add something here to the 4 types of comments. To the people with positive comments and their own stories, thank you so much. I had no idea this would blow up this much. To the people who complain about my English, yes, I'm German, not a native speaker. I'm giving my best here, and I'm trying to improve on it every day. That's all I can do. To the people with hateful comments, if you don't like it, that's totally fine. But there's no need of sharing insults, really. In my honest opinion, it was a valuable lesson for my boss to let them have a well-thought concept before giving the official task. To the people who don't believe and say it's BS, I'm not here to convince you. If I can reach even one person to empower them to improve their work condition, then that's a complete win in my eyes." Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Broken Soul. It says, "If you're not being paid for being on call, why answer the phone in the first place? It can wait till Monday." OP responded to this comment and said, "You are definitely not wrong here. When I received the call, I was fully aware what he probably would say, and I couldn't stand the curiosity. I kind of agree with the commenter here that OP shouldn't have answered their phone, but in answering their phone, they made the boss realize just how valuable they were, and they were able to further their position in the company. So I think OP did a really good job. In fact, they're a pretty good negotiator in my eyes. What I really love about this though is that OP didn't just think about themselves, they got work clothes for their colleagues as well, and that right there makes OP a really great person. This next story comes to us from The Breakup 2013. "Short me $70,000 in violation of our written agreement? It'll cost you $1.8 million. Let's jump right in. Disclaimer, the names and some of the situations have been changed to protect the identities, but the dollars and general nature of the situation is completely true. Background, a year out of school in the early 1990s, I procured a job as a business analyst for a large family-owned tech company. This business was located in the booming heart of technology at the time and was very profitable. As tech took off over the next decade, the company thrived and remained family-owned. What was a rich family and company became exceedingly wealthy with a valuation and net worth in the high 9, low 10 figures. The family that owned it was quite neurotic, very moody, and had a reputation as very ruthless, greedy, when it came to financing, deal-making, employees, etc. I truly believe this is what held them back from ultimately becoming a household name as a company. As I progressed in the company, I gained more and more face time with the owners. I worked on some projects directly with ownership that really paid off, and gained me even greater access to their inner circle. Now, like a lot of people at the time, and particularly those who worked in tech, I was heavily invested in tech stocks. I discussed some of my investments and gains with ownership as casual conversation, though investing had nothing to do with my role in the company. That is, until one day in late 1999, when the owner came to me and asked me if I would invest some of his personal money. He wanted me to take big risks to see if they would pay off using $1 million of his personal money. I was a bit hesitant, but still being in my late 20s and wanting to prove myself, I said I would. I asked for a written agreement where they acknowledged this wasn't my role in the company, was a personal matter between the owner and me, and to document my compensation for this side arrangement, 20% of all profits. Around this same time, and by working in the industry, I started to notice the weakness associated with a lot of tech companies. They just weren't living up to their hype and stock price, and some seemed like they were starting to run out of money. I had no inside information, just a strong sense of which companies were struggling based on my work in the business. Based on this sense, I started using both my money and the owner's money to short tech companies just after the new year in 2000. For anyone unfamiliar with shorting, this means if the value of a stock decreases, the value of the investment increases. I had a few long positions, but my overall position was very short. Since the owner wanted big risk and big reward, I used his money and obtained leverage or margin from the financial institution where I maintained both his and my trading accounts. The accounts were separate, but both under my name. Again, I documented this and gained consent. Well, both my account and his suffered some moderate losses in the first 2 months of 2000 before the bubble began to burst and both accounts, but his in particular, began to skyrocket. Ownership's pettiness. In June, the company began to suffer a downturn. We were still profitable, but since we provided tech services and products, we were not immune to weakness in the broader market. I had not informed the owner of my short strategy. He came to me one day and asked how his money was doing, saying he suspected it was way down like the general market. To his surprise, I informed him that while we still had some money tied up in options, puts, and shorts, but based on the positions I had closed, there was $1.35 million in cash sitting in the account that belonged to him. Again, I still had a bunch of open positions which, if memory serves, were worth about $1 million on that date. But the positions I had closed had yielded $1.35 million in cash just sitting in his account, which was in my name. The owner, either through ignorance or lack of attention, said, "Great, $1.35 million, fantastic work in this down market. Will you please wire it to me?" I responded that I would, but would be taking my 20% of the $350,000 profit, or $70,000, before wiring him the $280,000. I also reminded him I still had open positions that had yet to pay off or close, but I didn't state the amount. He once again appeared not to understand or comprehend the open position statement, but instead totally focused on and became incensed about my rightful claim for $70,000. He went on and on about how times were tough. I should be grateful for a job, particularly at my young age, and the entire $350,000 was necessary for him and the company. I knew this wasn't true based on my position within the company. Worse, this was my first time personally experiencing the greed and corrupt nature that served as the basis for ownership's reputation. The revenge. Now comes the revenge, since after 2 separate conversations, the owner didn't seem to grasp that the open positions would yield at least some income and thus additional profit. I decided not to mention it again. I sent him back the entire $1.35 million and continued to manage the open positions to the best of my ability. And here's the kicker, the owner never brought it up again. He seemed to think the $1.35 million payment was the entire value of the account, and never understood or remembered that open positions still existed. He never asked for records, tax documents, or any kind of audit or financials. Given the fact that he was dishonest with me, I didn't feel the need to disabuse him of that notion. Ultimately, after a bit more net gain, I covered all of the shorts and exercised all of the options, puts in this case, for an additional $1.8 million. I worked for the company for 3 more years, and owner never asked about it during my tenure, after I gave notice, or since. I know it's a bit crass and even shady AF, but given his dishonesty with me over the $70,000, I felt justified in keeping the additional $1.8 million. I paid taxes on the gain, long-term capital gains, and went on my way with a fantastic nest egg. Nobody has asked about it since, and I have only told the story to a few people, and even then, only after the statute of limitations passed. The final ironic cherry on top of this sundae is that during my remaining 3 years, I gained greater influence with the ownership in position within the company because they considered me loyal for giving the $1.35 million back and not making too much of a stink about the $70,000 profit. Little did they know, I got the better of them. The company eventually folded due to family disputes, but my understanding is that ownership walked away in a very good financial position. They likely could have been a much better and greater company had they not practiced the same dishonesty that they showed me with their vendors, clients, and employees. Thanks for reading, and I hope you enjoyed. Now, OP did post this story about 2 years ago in the MaliciousCompliance subreddit. It was posted again recently because OP added the extremely short update at the top that says, "Update, the original post is below. Only this update paragraph is new. There have been no negative consequences from the below, and no consequences other than a few people DMing me with incorrect guesses. In fact, the remaining family members have reached out a time or two about some consulting work. They have no clue." Okay, so have we not learned yet that you don't screw over the people in IT, and you definitely don't screw over the people who are managing your money for you, especially if you're not financially literate enough to know what they're actually doing with your money? Now that I've had a chance to read this story for the second time, a few things come to mind. So that original profit, that $350,000, OP wired that all back to the boss. But did OP not pay any capital gains on that? Because it was in his name, so technically he'd have to pay the tax on that himself. But there's no mention of that at all in the story. Putting that aside, this story is a huge example of how people who already have money can make a lot more money by investing and whatnot. It's a lot easier for them to increase their position. Whereas somebody in OP's case, well, they weren't going to make anywhere near as much. So on the hypothetical assumption that the story is true, OP did a wonderful job of increasing their own position by using the money of somebody who was already wealthy. The statute of limitations is passed, and OP is in the clear. Well done. Our next story today comes to us from Competitive Chapter 4. Can't throw away a small box cause it'll fill up the trash can? Fine, I'll just clean my truck out. Let's jump right in. For a little context, I'm a construction worker with my own company truck. As far as from what I have seen in my area, most people with company trucks have this thing where the front two seats always stay very clean, aside from dirt that comes from working in my field of work. The back seats, however, are a different story. It is amazing how much trash gets thrown back there, whether it be water bottles, snack wrappers, food wrappers, etc. My company has a contract with a local detailer that comes and washes and vacuums all company trucks bi-weekly to keep the appearance up. We are just responsible for removing all large trash so they don't have to do too much work. Usually, we just throw out everything at the dumpster at the shop before the detailer goes in and works his magic. Anyways, on to the story. So today, I had just finished up a service call and was about to go on my lunch break. I had stopped at a local gas station near downtown Austin to pour gas right before I headed off to get some tacos. As I'm pouring gas, I look in the back of my tailgate and realized I forgot to throw away at the job site and didn't want to run the risk of it flying out and possibly causing an accident. So naturally, I decide to take it out, break the box down, and toss it in the trash can at the pump. Now, the box itself wasn't too big, about the size of a shoebox, and once broken down, it was probably about a quarter of that size. As I took the broken down box and placed it in the trash, one of the ladies who worked at the gas station came out furious, saying I wasn't allowed to throw away that box. She claimed the trash was only for smaller items and we weren't allowed to throw away larger things. I was really confused and told her that it really wasn't all that big and I didn't see an issue. She then argued that the cardboard can unravel and fill up the bin, and then she would have to replace the bags. I didn't feel like arguing, so I just obliged and took out the box and placed it back in the tailgate. She thanked me for not being so difficult and was about to go into the gas station before I stopped her and asked, "So then what can I throw away in the trash?" She replied with anything like water bottles, taco bags, wrappers, etc. Now cue the malicious compliance. After she said that, I thanked her for letting me know and proceeded to open the back door to my truck, and she got a hold of all the mess. I then proceeded to take out small loads of empty water bottles, taco bags, etc. It is truly amazing how much trash builds up in these construction trucks. Unless one had been recently cleaned out, I have never seen one with little to no mess. I think I'm pretty good at tossing the stuff out of my truck, but every 2 weeks when I submit my truck for cleaning, it always baffles me with how much mess is in there. I then proceed to stuff the trash can with trash and fill it up. Now, granted, these trash cans already had trash in them and weren't all that big, and I didn't really press down the trash to make more fit. I then proceed to move to the next trash can and started filling that one up, all while looking at her with the biggest smirk on my face. She then proceeded to tell me that I can't be throwing out that much stuff because it's only meant for small things that I bought from the store. I then proceeded to show her that almost all this stuff can be bought at the store she was working at. She then screams at me saying that there's no way I bought everything there, and that I probably got some from other places as well. I then pulled out my company gas card that was from her gas station and told her that this was the only gas station that I'm allowed to use while in this vehicle. So yes, I come to this store a lot, since it's right by my job, and most of this, other than the taco wrappers, come from here. She then proceeded to call me a butthole and a few other names as she stormed off into the store. I just sat there with such a huge feeling of accomplishment knowing that I dealt with that Karen accordingly. If you would have just let me throw out the small box, you wouldn't have to come out and replace the trash bags right now and could be sitting inside on your phone. But now, you gotta come out and do the job you're getting paid to do. It must suck to actually have to do what you were hired to do, all because you thought some small pieces of cardboard would fill up one little trash can. Little words of advice, next time, mind your own business. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one that got a bunch of awards. It's from a user called rjack151. It says, "To be fair, you did need to make room for the box in the back seat area to prevent it from falling off the truck." OP responded to this comment and said, "I think no comment will beat this one. If I had an award, I would give it to you, my good man." Well, I don't think OP had to worry about giving them an award for that comment, considering at the time of recording there's 57 awards on that particular comment. It was pretty good, to be honest. I think if you strip this one right down to the core issue, it's when she said that then she would have to replace the bags. And that's exactly it. It sounds to me like she just didn't want to do work. This is kind of the same thing that I try to explain to my kids. If you're gonna argue with me for 10 minutes over something that would take you 30 seconds to a minute to do, well, was it really worth the time to argue? One last point to make is that the trash cans are really there as a point of convenience for the customer. Because, you know, it's a gas station, usually attached to a convenience store. They're not there just for things you buy from that store. That makes absolutely no sense. It's not like OP was a serial offender that was dropping off garbage there every single day, filling up the garbage cans every single day. It sounds like this was a one-time thing. So let's just chalk this up to the laziness of the person working in the store. This next story comes to us from xgrunt24. "If I don't like it, I can find another job?" Okay, let's jump right in. I think this qualifies. I worked at a small shop serving an electrical apprenticeship. Myself and the shop manager had a few run-ins, and I assume he disliked me as much as I disliked him. I had refused to do a job and told him he didn't pay me enough. It was at the stockyards, and I was expected to put on a set of waders, crawl down into a rat-fat reclamation tank, and replace a submersible pump. Wasn't going to happen. Another time, he wanted me to lie to a customer to make an issue they were having sound like it wasn't our fault. I refused and told him if he wanted to lie about it, he was going to have to drive out to the job site and do it himself. He told me to keep my mouth shut and did come out. I think the only reason he didn't fire me was I was by far one of the most efficient and versatile employees. This fact had me questioning how much I was getting out of this apprenticeship, and was passively looking around for another shop to apprentice at. My wage scale was structured and I got regular raises, bringing me closer to journeyman's level over my time as an apprentice. So I had to find someone that would sign up to complete my apprenticeship as well as want to hire me. One of our better journeymen had gone to another shop and had introduced me to the owners. We had talked about what it would take to get me to move. Things were progressing, but nothing committed to at that point. Cue the malicious compliance. It's my evaluation and raise time. My manager calls me up to the conference room and explains that due to my performance and the shop being in a slow period, he was not going to give me the 25 cents an hour raise as my contract said, but was going to give me $1 more an hour once I became a journeyman. We argued and I told him if I can't trust you for a quarter, why would I believe the dollar? The argument ended in him telling me if you don't like it, you can always quit. Oh really? I picked up the conference room phone on the table in front of us and called the shop I had been talking with. I asked the owner if I brought my tools over today, would I have a job? After a quick and uncomfortable discussion with his partner, he said yes. I informed my manager I resigned effective now. I loaded my tools up, punched out, and went straight to work that afternoon. OP added an edit down at the bottom and it says, well, now I know what rest in peace my inbox means. It figures that my single largest post or comment is one where I am a complete butthole. My wife and daughter are laughing and apparently find that fitting. I would like to state a couple of things. 1. I was only a couple years out of the Marine Corps and was young and cocky. 2. I was still adjusting to civilian life. 3. 0 out of 10, do not recommend this course of action. 4. Yes, it was a breach of contract, but I left before I lost anything, so didn't feel it was a reasonable thing to sue over. I agree with OP here, a little bit of trust goes a very long way, and there was no trust in this situation. And they're completely right. If they weren't going to give them the quarter, why would they believe they were going to give them $1 an hour later on? That just doesn't seem to add up. I do like that at the end of this one, OP said that this was not the way to do things because, seriously, that other job really wasn't lined up yet. And you could tell from the awkward conversation that was had on the phone when he called them and they had to discuss whether they wanted to give him a job or not. That could have gone south very quickly, and then we wouldn't be reading about it in Malicious Compliance. So in the end, what I got out of this one is OP made a very dumb decision, but came out on top. So good work nonetheless. This next story comes to us from Hayden 2013. Not a team player? Okay, let's jump right in. Some required background. I worked for a university police department. The university requires employees to purchase a parking pass decal to park on campus. The police department is set a little bit off of the main campus, and we got away for years without needing to buy parking passes. One year, our police administration decided that we would no longer be exempt and had the parking services office put up a decal pass required sign for our lot. They told us that we must have decals to park there or we would be ticketed. Another officer and myself decided to start parking on the public street next to the department, which allowed us to avoid buying parking passes. This did not sit well with the department, and we both ended up in the chief's office for a meeting. The chief told us that, I'm not telling you you won't be eligible for promotion, but when we're looking for people to promote to sergeant, we need team players. He made it clear that he did not like that we were not purchasing parking passes, even though we were complying with the policy and not parking on campus without a pass. The malicious compliance. We had a sergeant who loved to go out of his way to find things that others were doing wrong. He would nitpick the smallest things trying to get one over on people. I love reading and would read policies and stuff in my free time, so I was well versed in how to use them to my advantage. I came up with a plan to get one over on the department using Sergeant Nitpick. On a week I knew Sergeant Nitpick would see, I went to the parking office and purchased a temporary parking pass. The normal decals would be placed on the rear window, while the temporary pass is a hang tag that goes on the rearview mirror. The campus parking policy stated if you did not have a decal as an employee, you could purchase a temporary pass once per year for up to 2 weeks at $4 per day. I purchased the temporary pass for 1 week, Monday to Friday, which was the best $20 I've spent. I worked night shift and Sergeant Nitpick worked day shift at the time. On Monday night, I parked in the lot with my new temporary decal, knowing that Sergeant Nitpick would see my car in the lot on Tuesday morning. When I came into work Tuesday night, I expected to get a call into my sergeant's office and spoken to. It didn't happen. By the end of my shift on Tuesday, I began to wonder if my plan had failed. On Wednesday, though, it happened. I get called into my sergeant's office, and he has an email from the captain. The captain stated that someone had noticed that I was parking in the lot without a decal, and I needed to get a decal if I was going to park in the lot. He also intimated that they noticed the hang tag and suggested that I had somehow gotten it nefariously. I had the biggest grin on my face, and my sergeant looked very confused. I explained the parking policy, that I had paid $20 for my temporary pass, that it was good through Friday, and I would stop parking in the lot after it expired. He started laughing and said he would take care of it. The next morning when I saw Sergeant Nitpick, I said good morning as I usually do. He would not speak to me. He did not end up speaking to me for about 2 weeks. I'm guessing he got an earful from the captain for the embarrassment he caused. Treat people better. OP doesn't state what country or state or province that they're in, but if it was a single party consent state, then they should have been recording that meeting in their pocket while they were in with the chief. Because that one line that the chief said, "I'm not telling you you won't be eligible for promotion, but when we're looking for people to promote to sergeant, we need team players." Yeah, that could have gotten them in a boatload of trouble. Another point on this one, and I'm not completely sure this is how it works, but if OP works for the campus, and the campus is charging them parking to come to work, isn't that being charged to come to work? Shouldn't the campus be covering that expense for OP because, well, you know, they work there? I'm just not up on the laws on this kind of thing, so if you know how this works, by all means, comment down below and let me know. This next story comes to us from Pickles McWaffle 1. I can't prop the door open? Alrighty then, let's jump right in. Been sitting on this story for a few months now. I work for a small moving company in my city. We move furniture and decor to many different places throughout the city. We got a call about moving a large load of bookshelves to a rather large industrial building. We loaded up 2 18-foot box trucks full of shelves and were ready to move. When we arrived at the building, we pulled around to the loading dock and began offloading the shelves. As we were bringing stuff off the truck, I went to building security to open the door. There had been a recent string of shootings in our area and everyone was locking all the doors. They handed me a doorstop and told me I could prop the door open since we have a large load. So I propped open the door and we got going. We no more than had the first pallet off the truck when the building's maintenance manager came running towards us. He screamed at us, "What are you doing? You cannot have that door propped open." Now, this man looked like he was somewhere between the ages of 76 and 105. He was as red as I've ever seen anyone. I calmly told him that security gave me a doorstop and told me since we have such a large load, we could keep the door propped open. Of course, he wasn't having it. "I don't care what security told you. You cannot have this door propped open." At this point, my Native American temper got the better of me. I replied, "Yes, sir." I walked over to the door and picked up the doorstop. I walked back to security and explained the situation. They rolled their eyes and explained that this crotchety old fossil is always causing problems all over the building. They told me I could still prop the door open, but now I was mad and feeling petty. He doesn't want us to prop the door open? Alrighty then. There was a buzzer outside of the door, so I buzzed security asking them if they could open the door. Well, guess whose office was right by said door, and thus, guess who security called to open the door and let us in? That's right, Fossil Man that was 2 days older than dirt. He opened the door and let us in. We made our delivery and came back to grab another pallet. I again buzzed security and they again asked Fossil Man to let us in. This happened twice more before he stopped me and said, "You know, if you wanted to keep that door open, you can, since you have such a big load." I replied with the biggest smile on my face, "Oh, no sir, this door cannot be propped open. I wouldn't want to upset anyone by doing that." He looked at me with a look on his face that was somewhere between murderous and the realization that he had made a huge mistake. 18 pallets later, we had the load delivered, and every single time, guess who had to let us in? It took us a little over 2 hours to get everything finished. The last pallet we delivered, I poked my head into Fossil Man's office and said, "Thank you so much for your help." I'm pretty sure he popped a blood vessel. Alright, OP, I can see how you got your malicious compliance, but let's be honest here. The best person in this story was the security guard who made sure that the consequences landed square on the idiot who created the problem in the first place. That was extremely well done. I'm also a very big fan of throwing it right back in his face. When he said that you could prop the door open because it was inconveniencing him, I think I would have done the same thing in that situation, OP. Looked him right back in the eyes and said, "We have to follow the rules. You said so yourself." Our next story today comes to us from Tango Tango 112. I didn't have to work overtime? Okay, roger that. Let's jump right in. I am a mariner. My position on the ship is mate. Below me are my deckhands who are responsible for the labor work like painting, grinding, maintenance, line handling, cargo ops, etc. Above me is the chief mate, second in command, and the captain, in charge of everyone and the responsible individual for the entire ship. We are officers and we do the planning for navigation, ship handling, training, payroll, etc. I work for a private company that pays me by a day rate, which is a 12-hour workday. I work 1 month on and 1 month off. Like most industries, we are undermanned, can't hire enough to fill all positions. Now, this ship I work on is even harder to crew up, mainly because of the captain. He's got a notorious reputation for being a jerk, so people find all sorts of ways not to come to this boat. And if they do, they only work one tour and never come back. I joined this ship back in May, and for the last 7 months, it's been kinda hell working for this captain. He's a narcissist, condescends everyone, insults everyone, works us like slaves, never thanks us, just an all-around class act. You know these types of bosses, they never let up. They push you to the limit and just makes you hate work and life. With that said, I've been working 15, sometimes 18 hours a day because we're shorthanded. I'm doing all sorts of work that's not in my job description. I had to do cargo ops, handling mooring lines, maintenance, all in addition to my mate duties. I'm a very hard worker, a team player, and never say no to work. The thing is, we don't get paid for any more than 12 hours of work a day, so all those extra hours I worked are unpaid. It burns me, and I freaking hate it, but like I said, I'm a team player. I want to make sure it's safe for my guys, the operations get completed, and clients stay happy, so I do what is asked of me. I'm also the cook. We don't have an official cook on board because this is considered a small crew and small ship. I was cooking lunch every day for my crew and many dinners too. Generally, you're on your own for breakfast and dinner. I was so good at my job that the captain and the chief mate passed their duties on to me so they can just sit back and relax. Chief mates and captains have a lot of paperwork to do, but I was handling that for them too up until this point. Well, one day, I'm just completely burnt out with these 15 to 18 hour days. I get into a discussion about how the captain and company is stealing my wages because I'm working more than 12 hours a day. I asked him if I could show up to watch an hour later than my scheduled duty. The engine department does this when they require their folks to work overtime the day before. I worked a swing shift, which overlaps both the captain and the chief mate, so it's not unheard of or uncommon to let guys show up late, especially if they worked more than 12 hours the previous day. Well, once I asked to sleep in an extra hour, all heck broke loose with him insulting me, calling me names, being racist. Nobody wants to work anymore, blah blah blah. Just nasty, inappropriate behavior that shouldn't happen, but happens all the time in this industry. He then finishes the verbal beatdown with a crap-eating grin. You know, mate, you never had to work overtime. You could have just said no. I was steaming at this point, but I just replied with, okay, roger that. I called it a day and went to bed. Cue malicious compliance. The next day, I'm already on watch and he comes to work and asks me what's for lunch. Nothing. I'm not cooking today. Did you pull out anything from the freezer at least? Nope. So nobody had any real food for lunch. They all made sandwiches and ate chips instead. Later that day, hey, I need you to go finish painting the rescue boat. The guys are busy with other projects and I want this done today. Well, Captain, since it's not in my job description, I respectfully decline. We get into a little argument, but he concedes. The very next day, he pulls the same thing. What's for lunch? Nothing. What do we have that we can cook real fast? I don't know, Captain. I didn't check. Cooking isn't my job, remember? So I don't plan on doing it. He rushes to cook some whole chickens in an hour, and they came out raw and really ticked off the crew. Nobody touched his food. This routine lasted a whole week until it was the end of my tour and I got to go home. I returned to duty a month later, and he thought I would forget or let it slide. I indeed did not forget or let it slide. For the next entire month-long tour, the captain had to do the cooking because the chief mate and I refused to do it, and he complained because he had to wake up early and prep food. I was already doing all that when I was cooking. I just didn't complain. I enjoy cooking, but I was willing to die on this hill. I wasn't letting go. I refused to let him win this battle. I did not cook one meal. To be petty, I made myself delicious food, did not share it. I refused any work that wasn't in my job description. What's he gonna do? Write me up on disciplinary for not doing someone else's job that isn't mine? Or for not working past 12 hours? Not happening. Understand, at this point, I was physically tired, burned out, mentally drained from doing everybody's job and taking crap from him. I asked for a transfer to another ship but got denied, so I'm still stuck on the ship with this captain, but now he knows where I stand, and I haven't cooked or done extra duty since. And that's what you get for taking advantage of a good worker and always insulting me. OP added an edit down at the bottom of the story. It says, I forgot to add that one of the reasons for not getting a transfer is because nobody is easily willing to come here and work with this guy. One day during that hitch, I came up to the bridge and overheard him talking to the assignment manager about keeping me here permanently because he's a good mate, he's prior military, and he can cook, blah blah blah. I was supposed to be a floater, filling in positions on different boats as needed, which is what I like. Well, that worked out well. Jumping down to the comment section below this one, there's one from a user called Batman Handler. It quotes OP saying, I'm a very hard worker, a team player, and never say no to work. They said, found your problem. OP responded and said, in my experience, the reward for good work is more work. I learn slow. There's another comment down below from a user called Random Person of the Day. It says, love how you basically told your captain to F right off, and he had no choice but to comply. It's not like it was your job in the first place. Captain F'd around and found out. Can you keep applying for a transfer until they finally concede? Or is it something you got denied and you're stuck with it unless you quit type of thing? OP responded to this one and said, occasionally there's openings on other ships that get posted looking for certain positions. For now, I just keep asking my assignment manager for new boats, but he says my position has all been crewed up permanent rotations. But rumor has it Captain is being assigned to an overseas ship soon, which is to his benefit and mine. The whole ship would benefit actually. We have a good crew except for this captain. He literally sucks the soul out of you, and I do this mental gymnastics 1 month at a time. Well, OP, if you happen to stay on this boat once that captain is gone, you really need to think about not doing all that extra stuff again, or at least a very small portion of it, but make sure you're staying within your hours. and make sure they know that you're going outside of your duties and you could stop doing this at any time. Don't let people take advantage of you. That happens way too much in the working world. Whether you're on a boat or in a building somewhere, it's the same. The people higher up want to get as much work out of you as possible for the lowest wage possible. That's just how it works. Our next story today comes to us from Miraculous Ladybug 93. Cancel the service? You bet. Let's jump right in. I work in roadside assistance as a third party for a lot of insurance companies. Like most customer service jobs, we get a heck of a lot of abuse, but the most of it comes from long wait times and/or not being fully covered. This happens often, but I very rarely am in the position where I get to see the fallout. Recently, I had a woman call in. She was completely pleasant, but in a huge rush, so she was a little snippy. No worries, I get it. But then it comes to letting her know that she is not covered for assistance and she has a huge out-of-pocket expense. She whines about the fact that she knows she has roadside, then that she supposedly set up the service earlier, so not only am I trying to charge her, but it's taking too long, and therefore the price should be waived. Finally, she gives up and tells me I'm useless and says, "Just cancel it," and hangs up. Being the good rep that I am, I call her back to confirm the disconnect was intentional. She picks up, then hangs up immediately, then sends me to voicemail on follow-up calls. So as instructed, I cancel the job request. I should note, intake doesn't take long, but it's annoying to go over, and if the customer doesn't know their exact location, like being on a freeway, it can take some time. A few hours later, I get a new call from an angry customer wondering where her service is at. I apologize for the frustration, ask for her reference number, and inform her that unfortunately, there isn't any service in the system. She starts going off. I do my best to calm her down and extract the needed information. Halfway through the call, I realize it's the same angry pants woman as before. When we start going over location, I remember the drop-off location and she gets excited and says, "Oh, you found my service? Is the driver on the way? It's ridiculous that it's taking this long. You should get this prioritized or expedited." To which I reply in my nicest CSR voice, "No ma'am, your service isn't in the system. I remember when we spoke earlier. As you requested, I canceled the job at that time. So it's only getting open now and the amount will be this." "That's more than it was earlier." Yes, the pricing changes throughout our day to continuously match the market, stay competitive, and incentive drivers to continue taking jobs at unpopular times. She was silent. Also, we have longer ETAs at this time, so you will want to get this payment taken care of ASAP so we can find a service provider to avoid a longer wait. I can send a text message to you to complete payment." She stutters, But I never told you to cancel it before." Starting to lose patience. "Ma'am, our calls are recorded. I notate obsessively, and I called you back multiple times trying to confirm." "I want to speak to your supervisor," ranting to make me scared. "No problem, one moment. It looks like there is currently a 20-minute wait for a supervisor. I'm happy to wait with you." "Fine then, get my service started." "Certainly, I'll send the text for payment." She finally broke down and paid it and gave up waiting for a supervisor. She swore up and down that she was going to report me. Either way, I felt vindicated with my tiny bit of malicious compliance. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Motor1 is stopping. It quotes OP when they said, "I'm happy to wait with you." They said, "That would be awesome. Both of you sitting on the phone hating each other and saying nothing while waiting for the supervisor to enter the fray and get completely blindsided by the fury that has already erupted." OP responded to this one and said, "Oh, it's always my favorite. We don't have supervisor callbacks until the service is completed. So at least once a week, I get paid to scroll Reddit or a webtoon while listening to the muffled ranting of an angry customer stuck on the side of the road." Well, this was a very interesting story for me because my last job, literally right before I became KCC, was as a tow truck driver, and I was the one who went to those people on the side of the road who had been there for a bunch of hours, but I had literally just gotten that call about 20 minutes before. So I would walk into a crap storm of vitriol, but that was just the way it went. So it was really interesting for me to read this story and get some insight into another part of the job, because these were the people who put the notes on the calls that I had to go to that said that the customer was here, but they were actually 10 kilometers further up the road. Yeah, that happens. This next story comes to us from ConnectBasket2698. You must work the weekend. Let's jump right in. I was an IT contractor for a company doing a large new project. There were about 30 people writing code. We were allowed as much overtime as we were willing to work, and I could use the money. I was working 12 hours, 5 days a week. On the weekends, I would go racing, usually out of state. It was common on Thursday to get called into a meeting saying we needed to work 8 hours Saturday, 4 on Sunday. Most people would have 52 hours in total. I would do it if available, putting me at 72 or 76 since 4 hours is stupid. Other times, I would point out I would already be at 60 and had plans. I was given an exception the first couple of times. Then I was told I was not being a team player. So I clarify, if I work 12 hours between 5 p.m. Friday and 9 a.m. Monday, is that good? Yes, well, okay then. I left the office at 9 p.m. on Friday, 4 of the 12 down. The race trailer was already loaded up and ready to go. I headed out in the morning for a 4-hour drive. After the race, I headed back. Since I was driving near the office and the parking lot was empty, I pulled in trailer and all around 3 a.m. I figured just badging in wasn't enough to demonstrate compliance. I sent an email out to the group with every task I completed. I completed everything I had been assigned. There was a whiteboard with unassigned tasks. I sent an email that I was pulling a task, then another when completed. I had my full hours in at 11 a.m. I was being a smart butt. However, I didn't really expect the manager to get as annoyed about it as he did. A bit later, my contract was cut by that manager for my abrasive personality. The fallout seems to have been against me, but not in the end. My contract was cut. I was told on a Thursday morning and given the next 3 full weeks notice. By Thursday afternoon, I had a job interview scheduled for Monday. By Monday afternoon, I had a couple more scheduled. I started a new position with no gap. That is pretty much the malicious compliance. Below is the fallout from the retaliation. The manager blamed the abrasive personality comment on the business. They are the people asking for and defining the project. I only worked with one. During my notice, I was working with her. I said something about someone else having to do the next phase. She says, yeah, that sucks. After giving cat butt face, I tell her that I was told the business wanted me gone. Since she was the only business I dealt with, wavy hand motion. She just got a pissed look and stormed off. Her anger went up the organizational tree and back down my branch. Manager was told, I want OP on this project, deal with it. I had multiple people, HR, managers, peers, etc. ask me if I wanted to stay. They would have to make the crap hit the fan to do so. They didn't want to do that if I was leaving anyway. I said I already had accepted an offer. I just wished he had to be the one to ask me to stay. He was made to ask me if I could extend the notice period to provide training sessions on my techniques. So you want my productivity, just not me? Well, yeah. No, I am already scheduled to start a new position. During my notice, 12 people found new positions and gave their notice. The attitude was that if the company was willing to cut me, they could cut anyone at any time. They would rather leave on their own terms. That was not a problem for coders at that particular point in time. I was still working 60 hours a week during my notice period. On my last day, when leaving, the only person still there was that manager's boss. When I said bye, he said he had meant to talk to me before I left. I sat down and talked. I said, you must be wondering why I would be working late on my last day. I wanted the section of software I was on to be working before I left, so no one could blame me for it not getting done. I said I was the only one left in the last few months who was working on it. All tests had passed that day. Another section with similar work has 6 people working on it and is not done. He began to question the manager's decision making. He thanked me and said he may reach out in the future. A couple months later, someone reached out to me to see if I would come back. The manager's contract was cut, as were the other 3 people from his contract house. An employee who was buddies with the manager was moved off the project. Apparently, since the manager was also a contractor, he could not technically cut my contract. It was done by this employee. I didn't go back, as my new abrasive personality manager and I got along great. It definitely sounds like that company learned if they're willing to get rid of one of their good top performers, well, that's gonna make everybody else wary about their job and maybe not wanting to work there anymore. In OP's case though, if they were a contractor yet the business was dictating their hours, it sounds like the business just wanted them to be contractors to maybe get around some tax laws, because if they were dictating the hours like that, that kind of makes you an employee. I don't know what the tax implications are there, but there's definitely something. I'm sure somebody smarter than me will comment on it down below, and I'm really interested to see how that works. Check out all P's linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.